Hi, I've decided to summarize all of the best C64 games. If you're feeling nostalgic for the system or never had a chance to try it out, this is the best place to start. Advance of the Mega Camels is the sequel to the original Attack of the Mutant Camels, which in itself was a follow-up to Grid Runner, and it's an entirely different game. It's not a centipede-like shooter anymore, but a side-view one, putting you behind the steering stick of a space fighter facing an impending and never-ending onslaught of gigantic camels on your base. It's a score attack kind of a game, as its mechanics don't really change at all throughout it. It's an early C64 game too, so you can't really fault it for the simplicity. Rastan is a port from the arcades and a fantasy side-scrolling action platformer. The original character was clearly based on Conan the Barbarian, and the gameplay is kept in a similar theme. As ports to C64 go, this one's not terrible. It's not great either, as not only it's rather slow but also backed with terrible jumping mechanic, making you often leap into oblivion. It's something to get used to and work around perhaps, but also something that can unnecessarily kill you in the middle of the skirmish with buddies when you least expect it. Predator is based on the movie of the same title and puts you in a bulky muscles and veins covered body of Arnold Schwarzenegger fighting through a jungle full of bodies and, well, a predator. That said, given C64's capabilities, you're packed into a group of 20-something pixels and not a real body. Deal with it. Anyway, the game attempts to follow the plot of the movie, at least where possible, and starts with your squad already killed off. While there are two versions of Predator on C64, European and American, and the latter is slower and overall better playing, the differences between them are minuscule and both are too difficult for my liking. Talking about games with two versions, Space Harrier has them too, and the entry we're going to cover today is European, as it's just a tad better. Sega's classic Space Harrier has been a huge hit in the arcades and on most home systems too, offering fast-paced, third-person shooting/flying action and a very decent graphics. Well, C64's version seems not to have received the memo, and its presentation is rather disappointing and the gameplay chaotic, to say the least. I'd say it's shit, but then again many of you loved it, so I'll change it to I was shit at it. I'm sure you're not surprised at all that Buck Rogers' Planet of Zoom is another of those arcade conversions. I mean, in the early 80s it was a norm, and many, if not most home games, were conversions or ports from the arcades. In essence, Planet of Zoom is a sci-fi themed racer in which you must zoom between series of pairs of pylons without crashing. You can move left, right, slow down and speed up, and even shoot. Each level requires a series of pylons to be passed, and each next increases that number gradually. Everyone knows Golden Axe, a cult classic Sega's fantasy arcade beat-em-up in which you go through a series of levels, defeating numerous different monstrosities, trying to find and kill evil ruler Death Adder. You can play as either Barbarian ex-Butler, Dwarf Julius Thunderhead, or Amazon Tyrese Flare. Did you notice how only one of them has no name or surname, but just a function in his naming? Weird. Anyway, C64's port may not be the best out-of-home conversions of the game, but given the system's capabilities, it was a fantastic and very faithful to the arcade release. The only thing that always bothered me about it was the lack of multiplayer, which I feel, in a title like that, really benefits replayability. Pole Position is a very decent early port of a fantastic at the time arcade racer. In fact, I've even spoken about the arcade original in my recent Evolution of Racing Games video, because that's how important I consider it to be. C64's version may not be perfect, but given when it released, it was a stellar title and an excellent time attack kind of a game. The graphics are understandably simple, barebone one would say even, but the gameplay is all there and the animations are smooth and satisfying. If you have no other racer for your C64, this one's good enough to keep you playing. There are two ports of Outrun to C64, an American one and this one, hailing straight from the heart of Europe. The American version has a blonde sitting next to a driver, just like in the arcade original, and the stripes on the road are more similar to how they worked in the arcades. The European outing, however, looks a bit better and plays smoother and faster, resulting in a much more satisfying experience. Either of them, however, has a fantastic recreation of the classic arcade tunes, and Splashwave is, was and will always be the best soundtrack to ride your Ferrari Testarossa to. I have very mixed feelings about RoboCop on C64. On one hand, it had a pretty nice graphics, particularly the high-res sprites, and it ran rather smoothly despite all of the on-screen action. And on another, it's so difficult, man. I never thought that I'll ever hear myself saying it, to you no less, but I just can't even. It's impossible and it's a pain to play. Well, there's usually a reason for seemingly unexplainable silly design choices as this one, and RoboCop has one too. Apparently the last, 6th level was never finished before the game being released, so the devs raised the difficulty in all others considerably, especially in the 5th one, to prevent the gamers from ever getting as far. Ace 2, a follow-up to the first Ace, is still a head-to-head flight combat simulation. Well, I say simulation, but what I really mean is an arcade shooter. It's 1v1 in jet fighters and it's surprisingly addictive if you have a friend to play against. When you're facing the CPU, its staying power is rather limited, but with a buddy, well, it definitely can provide for a couple of hours of dogfight and couch elbow combat. "1942 is a conversion of an arcade original, surprise surprise, and a decently playing even if unnecessarily punishing game. It's one of those ports to C64 that took the word porting to heart, and along with all the 24 levels, sounds and music, the arcade con-munching difficulty landed on the Commodore's system too. Which is silly, as home games didn't need to be as demanding as you only paid for them once. So 1942 is a memorization kind of a game that requires you to memorize all of its enemies' patterns to complete it, as otherwise you'll be a subject to countless, often unavoidable deaths. It's definitely not my kind of a shooter. Paperboy on C64 is a two-edged sword. On the first glance and attempt, it may seem annoying, a bit too sensitive to control and rather drab looking. But if you give it time, practice a little, it will grow on you and you'll learn to appreciate it and work around its few little annoyances. It's an okay arcade conversion in which you play as a boy delivering newspapers to its subscribers, riding on your bike along the suburban streets and avoiding obstacles. It's a simple and rather repeatable premise, but also a surprisingly playable one. I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone by now, but Renegade, same as the other half of the games on this list, is an arcade conversion. It's also a side-scrolling beat-em-up, or brawler if you will, which sees you pacifying hundreds if not thousands of bodies on the mean streets of Brooklyn, trying to get to your girlfriend's kidnappers, then kick them to the curb and sever, prompting the happily ever after ending. More or less. There are quite a few different moves to perform, and if you get used to a very unusual controls, utilizing joystick and a keyboard, or two joysticks at the same time actually, it's also a pretty fun playing game. I freaking loved Burger Time back in the day, and this C64 release is an unofficial ripoff. It's unofficial, but it's rather good, despite what some may tell you, and it plays very similar to the arcade original. It's an action platformer in which you play as Chef Peppa and have to create giant hamburgers by dropping all the ingredients onto one another and then plates by walking over them, all the while avoiding enemies or treating them with a handful of pepper to escape them. It's a very simple idea, but a really playable one as well. Rampage is a party game for up to 3 players, which puts you in heights of 3 ginormous monsters: George the Gorilla, Lizzie the Lizard and Ralph the Werewolf, and sends you onto the series of cities that you have to destroy one by one, along with their defending forces. And if that sounds like a hoot, and a time well spent toppling skyscrapers and munching on civilians, you're right, it's exactly that. Eating consumables restores your health, consuming firemen allows you to breathe fire for a short while, and saving damsels in distress rewards you a whole bunch of points. If you have a buddy or two with you and some time, Rampage is a blast. Sanction is a horizontally scrolling shoot-em-up. Its most unique and well-known feature is that it shows its gameplay from 2 perspectives at once, side and top-down. And while it could be argued that it's just an unnecessary gimmick taking precious processing power from the CPU, I say it makes Sanction a one-of-a-kind game and a title worth experiencing. While the first few levels are not easy, they're definitely bearable, but the latter ones get rapidly more demanding and will put your memory to the test. Oh, and the loading music for Sanction is fantastic, so if you ever get a chance, definitely check it out. If you've played one Friday the 13th game from the 80s, you've played them all. And no, that's not exaggeration. You and your friends visit Crystal Lake Holiday Camp just to learn that it's haunted by the Maniac killer known as Jason Voorhees. So, it will be up to you to find and kill Jason before he gets to you or your friends. And since he likes to play dress-up, he will often doppelgang as one of your buddies. Since Jason likes to disguise as them often, you will have to run around the entire camp, slapping the shit out of your group of friends to reveal him. You know, sometimes simple is better than feature-packed. And Django Hunt is just that, as simple as they come. It's an action-adventure game in which your beloved Penelope has been taken by the evil cannibals. Are there any other cannibals, really? I seem to recall good ones in one of the Monkey Island games, but I'm not 100% positive on that now. Anyway, it's obviously up to you to go through 4 addictively playable challenges to save her. So you'll swing on the ropes, you'll fight crocodiles underwater, you'll avoid a rain of falling boulders, and you'll face a nefarious cannibal warrior too. It's a fun game to pick up and complete, but it lacks any real staying power. I'm one of the 7 people who never really liked Bomb Jack. The other 6 are sadly no more. And no, they did not die of old age, I'm not that old. They were eliminated by the assassins sent by the Bomb Jack High Lords. In short, BJ aged 8. Any similarities to other abbreviations are naturally entirely accidental. And while the original arcade bomb collecting full-screen action had some charm to it, even if it was not my cup of tea, this 664 version is too hectic, too fast and too constrained with the screen size to play well. And it makes Bomb Jack a rather frustrating experience. Well, at least to me. The best way I could describe Aliens the computer game would be to call it a first-person squad-based sci-fi horror survival shooter thematically based on the movie of the same title. You are in control of 6 marines and have to take them through a large complex, escaping dangers and fighting off aliens. Since all the soldiers have cameras on their helmets, you control them from a first-person view, and because aliens are so PS compared to them, the feeling of dread and being trapped with a predator always trying to get you never really leaves you throughout the entire adventure. Ballblazer is a 1 or 2 player first-person perspective sports game that could be best described as a mixture of Pong and soccer. I would say football since I'm European, but saying soccer removes all the confusion. That said, this explanation seems to take way more time than necessary, so maybe I should remove it. Nah, I'm leaving it in. Ballblazer, aside from its surprisingly addictive gameplay, was best known for its revolutionary at the time graphics and a banging soundtrack, and it truly delivers on both fronts. Dragon Ninja, aka Bad Dudes, is an arcade side-scrolling simple beat-em-up, mechanically similar to the granddaddy of the genre, Kung Fu Master. So it's a mostly one-hit, one-kill kind of a brawler, and while there was nothing wrong with that, especially in the 80s, today it feels more like a novelty than a game you'd like to go through beginning to an end. Even if it looks rather nice, utilizing high-resolution animated sprite assets. The Dragon Ninja clan has kidnapped the POTUS and you're on the mission to rescue him, alone against thousands of bodies. I mean, what could go wrong, right? Grisor is a European version of Contra. Yes, that Contra, the one you know from NES. Or actually no, it's a port of the one you know from the arcades. Potato tomato. Still, it's a fantastic 1 or 2 player mostly side-scrolling action shooter in which you complete a series of stages, spreading death and destruction all around, trying to dismantle a terrorist organization known as the Red Falcon. A pretty cool name, I must add. While the C64 port is a pretty faithful and hella fun recreation of the original, it only contains 6 out of 10 of its stages, which is a bit disappointing, but I suppose the constraints of the C64's memory were a factor, and the devs might have wanted it to be a single load release. Cauldron is a nightmare of a beauty. Beauty, cause it's a rather good-looking, smoothly animating, genuinely creepy feeling and well-playing game. And nightmare? Well, because it is one. C64's version is incredibly tough. While the enemies draining your health relentlessly could be somewhat explained with the challenge level being up there to invite repeated attempts at a playthrough, the platforming sections have no excuse for terribly designed stages. Not only jumps require pixel-perfect precision, but badly aimed ones, which let me tell you, will be something you'll experience often, can and will lead to many unnecessary deaths. Other than that, Outrun is a great game. Funny enough, the first time that I played Saboteur was not on C64 but on a Timex. This C64 Sport is super sweet too, and if you like spy/ninja themed action-adventure games, there are a few better only. Well, there were a few better, today there's probably plenty. Saboteur is a beat-em-up stealth brawler, and it mixes these three seemingly different genres with grace and unbeatable playability. You are sent into the heart of a Battlefield complex to plant a bomb deep inside and then escape before triggering an explosion. The background story may be simple, but the gameplay will carry you from the moment you launch it till the very end. Or as I've recently learned while replaying it years after, until you fail time after time again, as you just might. One of the two. Not unlike a more famous, and let's not kid ourselves here, better to International Karate Plus, Bangkok Nights is a versus fighting game focusing on one martial art. In its particular case, Thai boxing, also known on the streets as let's see how your teeth will take a rather rapid hit from my knee. The included set of moves is decent and as realistic as it was possible to achieve on an underpowered 8-bit machine. And the presentation, I mean, just look at it, it's fantastic. Sprites take nearly half of the screen and animate super smoothly. Given the lack of special fiery or explosive attacks and only superficial differences between the opponents, the single-player mode lacks staying power. But in multiplayer, oh, it's a blast! C64 was known for amazing sounds and music thanks to its incredible SID chip, for its popping graphics thanks to its rather fast and smooth sprite handling and a 16-color palette, and games because of the hundreds if not thousands of amazing releases that it received over the years. And while Pit Stop is an early title gracing our machines in 1983, it dropped like a pile of bricks on an unsuspecting C64 audiences and offered them the ultimate for the time racing experience. It's an incredible little speedster that will keep you coming back for more. While C64's Pac-Land port is as close to the original as it was possible given the resources available on the system, by the time Pac-Land arrived on the machine, it was already a 4-year-old game. And 1984's gameplay in 1988 felt at the very least archaic. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad game at all, it just felt a bit outdated on the first day it graced our little 8-bit powerhouses. It's an action platformer starring everyone's favorite yellow dog, in a little wild shoes and red hat no less, looking like a boss that he actually was in a completely different game. One we'll get to talk about in one of the future videos. If Vendetta looks eerily similar to you to The Last Ninja, good, because it was made by System 3 and on the same engine. As you can see, it's naturally a top-down isometric action-adventure with some car racing segments in between its regular levels. And if you think, wow, that's pretty cool, a rather varied C64 game, think again, because these driving sections are pretty crap. Your main mission is to save your brother and his daughter, and as you do just that, also clear your name gathering evidence against the true kidnappers. Shadow of the Beast was a game that was made purely to show off Commodore's latest 16-bit machine, the Amiga 500, and its pure processing power and capabilities. And as such, it was a marvel, with all the multi-level parallaxing, huge sprites and beautiful sounds and graphics. As a game, however, it lacked any real substance and was just a memorization type of affair, with numerous unnecessary death traps and some annoying enemy respawn mechanics. So seeing it released on C64 was a bit surprising. And what was even more unexpected was that it was the exact same way. So, also a show-off of what the system was capable of in the hands of talented devs paired with mediocre and memorization-based gameplay. Roadrunner is a simple arcade depiction of the classic cartoon as they come. So, you play as the Roadrunner, and your task is to Well, keep running, on the road no less, and avoid any and all dangers like trucks, landmines, falling rocks and the likes, and not get caught by the wily e-coyote. You're also to eat birdseed along the way to keep your strength, and the scores are awarded for all the seeds that you eat and for all the traps that your nemesis falls into. It's a pretty solid and accurate arcade conversion and a decent game for a couple of playthroughs. It's uncanny how well as big and as advanced simulation as SimCity works on a lowly C64. I mean, sure, graphically or from a sound design point of view it's a dog, nay, a dirty mutt, but when the gameplay is taken under consideration, it's fantastic. Also, mutts deserve love and care too. Note that down. Anyway, it's an incredibly designed, thought out and made city simulation in which you're responsible for everything. From layout of the roads, through supplying it with electricity, to zoning and all the necessary services, all to keep it prospering and growing and the money outside of the red. It's naturally a much better looking game on more powerful systems, but content-wise, C64 version is not lagging behind them at all. Not unlike over half of the games we've spoke about today, Mikey is an arcade port. And it puts you in the high school shoes of the titular Mikey who has to run around the school and its numerous classrooms collecting hearts. And the idea here is to spell out a word or short sentence by doing so. You pick up hearts by shouting at them when beside them, and the small ones are picked up after just one of these outbursts, while the big ones require around 3. While you do all that, however, the teacher, chef and janitor are trying to stop you. It's a score type of a game, and as such, it's pretty fun. Auf Wiedersehen Monty is a super fun, classic flip-screen action platformer starring everyone's favorite, at least in the mid-80s in UK and on the ZX Spectrum, Monty Mole. And Auf Wiedersehen Monty is a follow-up to earlier and equally as good Monty on the Run. Auf Wiedersehen Monty means goodbye Monty in German, and peace out rodents come in Latin if you were wondering. Monty is being chased by the Intermol agency, so he has to collect plenty enough cash around Europe to purchase himself a secluded island and run away to live there. It's not a smart story perhaps, but honestly, did 8-bit platformers needed those at all? While I wouldn't call Bounder an unknown title, it's definitely one that disappeared in the sea of other, more flashy and action-packed shooters, platformers or racers, which is a shame as it's a rather banging release and unexpectedly playable game. You play as a small tennis ball that has to bounce around the 10 levels the game is composed of, making sure to always land on grey platform squares and not fall off of them. Some of the squares may have bonuses on them, like long jumps or teleports, and learning all of them fast and their best use case scenarios is a key to success. Either way, if you wanna play a genuinely fun, but devoid of any shootings, racing or platforming game, Bounder is the way to go. I may be wrong, because it was a long time ago, although not as long as when the game released, but I believe that Moon Patrol may be the very first C64 game that I've ever played. And for the first experience with the system, despite its rather simple graphics and gameplay, it was a stellar introduction to the little beast that could. The idea here is rather simple, to keep driving right, avoiding or jumping over any obstacles, all the while killing aliens and not getting killed yourself. And as per usual when something's easy to explain, it's difficult to achieve. And while Moon Patrol starts easy, the difficulty quickly ramps up and soon enough it becomes a truly demanding game. Hunchback is an action platformer in which you play as the titular Hunchback on a mission to rescue a beautiful Esmeralda Agata Carmena Gonzalez Cardamon from the clutches of an evil mayor who imprisoned her in High Tower. And to do so, you'll need to travel through a stronghold full of dangers, flying arrows, fireballs, fire pits, pikemen, and many, many more. You know, I always wondered how such hero as our Hunchback or even Mario has to go through all these hoops to save the damsel in distress, just for the game to end when he gets to her. And no game ever shows him actually going back through all of these same dangers, but this time with the saved girl. Weird, isn't it? Falcon Patrol is a two-way side-scrolling action shooter in which you are flying a vertical takeoff and landing fighter, taking on series of enemy crafts attacking the city. Both rockets and fuel are limited, but there are a series of landing platforms scattered around the game's metropolis which you can use to restock. Doing so, however, leaves you temporarily vulnerable. And let me tell you, the enemies are not sleeping, and with each next wave, there's more and more of them, and they're more and more aggressive. Either way, if you like shooters, Falcon Patrol is a brilliant little game and a time well spent defending those who cannot defend themselves. Thunderblade is such a weird port to C64. I mean, the arcade game that it is based on is a fast, joint third-person and top-down shooter in which you're flying an attack copter through 12 action-packed levels, destroying anything and everything that dares to enter the screen, or stand in your way, potato tomato. What makes C64 version unusual is that it looks terrible. Despite releasing in 1987, it looks like some of these early 83 or 84 games, and the scaling effect known from the arcade original is, well, special here. But, and that's the most important thing here, despite looking like a piece of old gum suspended in a puddle of murky water, Thunderblade plays really well. I mean, the collision detection may not be perfect and the gameplay speed could improve too, but it's just fun. I freaking loved ping pong on my C64. I mean, it's a simple game, there are no rule modifiers, no upgrades, power-ups or anything else, but the bare-bone table tennis gameplay that it offers? Chef's kiss, my dear viewers. It's a fast, demanding, but also perfectly controlling title which is as good against CPU as it is when playing with a friend. And it's also a very skill-based game, meaning that when you fail to connect with your shot or serve, it's not the controls, it's not the game, it's you. You having to practice and get better. It's an A+ game and one I would recommend to any and all C64 gamers. Pitfall originated on Atari 2600 and most likely that is the version that everyone remembers, loves and considers an ultimate outing. But C64 Sport, despite a bit murkier colors and an asshole of a scorpion chasing you relentlessly, is a pretty cool version as well. All of the content found in the original, all the screens, hazards and enemies are here, and it plays nearly as good as it did on the platform of its spawning. You're Harry Pitfall, a legendary treasure hunter who's on an adventure to seek out and uncover the great riches hidden deep in the Mayan jungle. I vaguely remember Popeye cartoons, though they were never really as popular here as they were in the States, and also when I was a kid they were already really old, so chances of catching them airing anywhere were rather minuscule. That said, I did saw a few, and I'm familiar with all the characters despite not following the cartoons daily. And Popeye on C64, another of those countless arcade ports, is one of my favorite games on the system. You naturally play as the teacherless sailor, and you are trying to win Olive Oil's love by collecting tokens of her love that she drops. This can be hearts, notes or whatever, the point is you gotta grab them before they cross the bottom of the screen. Birds and magically flying bottles along with Brutus are there to stop you, and you should avoid them not to fail. From time to time you get to consume a can of spinach, giving you super sailor powers, and then you can teach all three a lesson. Dig Dug is a game that I wasn't smart enough to appreciate when it was relatively new, but that's on me and a story for a completely different video. It's an arcade title for 1 or 2 players, which sees you digging in dirt, defeating enemies. But so that your life would not be too easy, these monsters roam the tunnels that you dig and try to stop you. You can either use rocks to drop on the bodies to squash them, or your trusty pump, which I have no idea why you're carrying with you, to inflate them to the point that they will explode. The idea behind the gameplay and level progression mechanic might be simple, but the fun is definitely in abundance. Shootouts, car chases, explosions, jumps and series of tricks, all of that is in the Action Biker. Or it is not, but it doesn't mean that it's a bad game, even if it's devoid of these truly action-packed moments. In Action Biker, you play as Clumsy Colin, a character from a British comic buster, and you have to ride around obstacles-covered map, collecting clothes and bike parts to enter a drag race. It's the collecting part that's the heart of the game though, and you will have to ride around different platforms, fenced-off areas, jump over obstacles, and in general, you'll look in every nook and cranny of the map trying to source all these dropped items. If you've played one Tetris, you've played them all, and I don't recall playing a really bad version of the game. So, this 1988 C64 version is a feature-rich outing following all of the common rules of the game. So the tetro miners fall from the top of the screen and you have to arrange them on the game board so that they would form full lines, which then disappear, adding to the score. If at any point the screen would fill up, the game would end too. If there's one thing that I would change about this version of the game, it's the scrolling, which is a bit flickery for the lack of a better word. And while it's not an issue gameplay-wise, it tends to get annoying after a little while. There are 3 asteroids within a far-off asteroid belt that house hidden caches of precious gems and rare minerals. They are treated as vaults to hold these priceless items in relative safety for when they are needed the most. Zugians, evil aliens bent on destruction of all life, found them however, and it's now your mission to fly the experimental spacecraft dubbed Cybernoid to recover the riches. While Cybernoid is an arcade shooter, it's more of a methodical one, in which careful planning and correct choice of weaponry for the challenges ahead work better than an all-guns blazing approach. Miner 2049er is another of those super simple looking games that excel in playability. It's also a really tough cookie to crack, and you will die left and right while playing, but you will also keep coming back for more. It's a flick-screen action platformer starring Bounty Bob, miner by trade, drunk by the midday. And the game sees you completing stages by walking over platforms which then change their color. And when all of them do, you get to move to the next level to repeat the same process in a new environment facing different enemies. While the gameplay mechanics themselves are not too complicated, making Miner 2049er a title easy to get into, the constantly ticking down timer and pixel-perfect jumps make it a rather demanding game. BMX Simulator is not a simulator at all. It's all BMX though, so it's at least 50% accurate. Well, while it may not be entirely spot on that title, it's definitely full 100% fun if you have someone to play it against. Because same as with most other racers of the kind, it's the most enjoyable experience when played against others and not that great when facing the CPU. I mean, it's not bad when racing against C64, but it's nowhere near as good as when you play it with a buddy. I really can't tell you how many hours I've spent playing 10th frame with friends, but it was a lot. I mean, we've played it even before we learned the rules of bowling. And there's a good reason for that. Because as games covering the sport on C64 go, this one's definitely the best. It offers a single game mode and an entire season, up to 8 players multiplayer, hooking, spinning, intuitive and easy to grasp controls that are also demanding to master, and a super smooth and lifelike animations. And the fact that it was made by the Carver brothers, the very same responsible for borderline genius leaderboard golf, made it an instant pickup back in the day. Ninja is a side-scrolling screen-flicking beat-em-up starring world's greatest assassin, a ninja. Funny enough, while visiting Japan, I learned a lot about ninjas, and they were more like spies than assassins, and they did not really train to fight or kill, rather to move stealthily and escape danger. In fact, any average samurai could probably take more than one ninja at a time in a direct combat and win. Also, shurikens were not used for killing, but to make sound and distract those who chased the ninja. Who knew? Anyway, this iteration of ninja is naturally more than capable of spreading death and destruction. And not only it does so near constantly, but also collects gold idols. You know, something ninjas are known for. Target Renegade is an unofficial sequel to Renegade we've spoken about earlier, and a considerably better side-scrolling arcade brawler. Mr. Big, so the villain of the series, is back, and this time he kidnapped your brother. And since no one's allowed to F around with your family, you head off to Big's big pen, his quote-unquote base of operations on the upper side of the town, to explain to you by means of broken limbs and teeth flying everywhere that your brother's place is not in captivity. As C64's beat-em-ups go, I have to say that this is one of the best, with beautiful high-resolution sprites, numerous attack moves, and different collectible weapons to use against variety of bodies. If you've not played it, fix it today. Whenever I look at games like Maniac Mansion, so high-resolution single-color sprites on black backgrounds and sparsely placed objects, I think of ZX Spectrum that suffered from terrible color clash. Fortunately, C64's Maniac Mansion suffers from nothing other than a bit inflated difficulty level. It's a flick-screen platformer in which you play as Miner Willy, who must travel through 20 caverns, some levels if you will, and collect all treasure scattered around them, avoiding all the enemies, hazards and falls from great height before the time runs out. Back in the early 80s, the king and queen of the prom, at least in the arcades, were Donkey Kong and Miss Pac-Man respectively, and Donkey Kong was Nintendo's first huge hit on the market. It was so big in fact that ports of the game appeared on home hardware literally within months, if not weeks. And C64 received two versions of the game, one by Atarisoft and one by Ocean. Both had their own up and down sides, but it's the Atarisoft one that you're currently watching. It's basically a one-to-one recreation of the arcade hit, in which, playing as Mario, you have to rescue Pauline from Donkey Kong. Yeah, not Princess Peach or Toadstool, but Pauline. Weird. You have to avoid bodies and barrels thrown by DK, and can pick up a hammer power-up to be able to destroy them. Kickstart is a simulation 2-player off-road bike racing game in which you and a friend get to complete increasingly more demanding stunt tracks for the best time. And if I was to compare it to something more well-known, I'd say it's like Excitebike on NES, only much more demanding, but also more rewarding when you master the controls. Or like Trials on Xbox and PlayStation, but in 8-bit format. If you enjoy this kind of challenges, Kickstart is definitely one to keep an eye on, and especially if you have someone to play it against. Le Mans is a C64 exclusive and racer/point score attack kind of a game, meaning that your goal is to overtake plenty enough cars within 60 seconds to acquire 20,000 points and extend your playtime by another minute. It's a very arcade-like design, giving you very little time to secure progression, but at that time most games either came from or were inspired by the arcades, so it's hard to fault it for that. Despite Le Mans' rather simple graphics, it looks sleek and clean, and the night driving effect is rather spectacular, at least for 1982. Believe it or not, but the arcade kit Kung Fu Master and its port that you're watching now is actually based on the movie of the same title. Very loosely, mind you, as it serves literally no story other than the setup, but it is. So Mr. X has captured Sylvia the pickpocket, and now you, playing as Thomas, have to save her. Between you and her there's naturally a good 1,000 or so of enemies, so you will need to knock the F out all of them, and bosses that you'll face at the end of each level before you'll be able to save her. Kung Fu Master is one of those extremely basic in its design beat-em-ups that had a lot of charm back then, but now are a bit underwhelming to experience. Some may say that waggling your joystick till it disintegrates into a pile of plastic, springs and loose buttons is no way to form a gameplay for a video game, and in most cases I would agree. But every now and then, when it's well made, it's actually really fun. Combat School is one of those rare cases. It's an arcade port that puts its own unique twist on the multi-discipline sporting game genre by dressing it in a military attire. It's a variety of different army-themed disciplines that are fun when played alone and fantastic if you have someone to challenge. While Donkey Kong may have been the first game where Mario was the protagonist, it's actually Mario Bros. Where I saw him first. And truth be told, it's probably the Mario game that I have the most fond memories of. I used to play it with my parents first and then friends too, and it was a multiplayer blast like no other. Same as its most famous, unavailable officially on the C64 Super counterpart, Mario Bros. Is a platformer too, though of the single-screen variety. And playing as our plumber and his green-loving brother, you have to topple different enemies and collect coins. The mechanics of the game are rather simple, but the fun that it provides is through the roof. You could say that BC's quest for tires is a primordial runner. And yes, you've heard that right, runner as in what you would play in the early days of candy bar touchscreen mobile phones. So a game where a character keeps moving forwards and you have to help him, in this case our cave mentor, pass any and all obstacles and hazards to accumulate points. The background story stipulates that the cute chick has been kidnapped by the dino and that Thor has to save her. So you will jump or duck over many things along the way and you'll have a lot of fun. Spin Dizzy is an isometric arcade platform puzzler, though other than having to figure out how to complete each stage, there's very little of any puzzling involved. The idea here is to explore these semi-3D environments within given time by moving your ball around them. I say ball, but the object that you control can be transformed into other shapes too. The difference is only visual though, so potato tomato. Either way, every time you fall off the grid, you lose a bit of time and you can extend it by collecting jewels. Certain similarities to Marble Madness are quite obvious in Spin Dizzy's design, but ultimately it's its own thing. Up and Down is a port of a pretty fun arcade game in which you drive a little buggy-looking car, collecting flags for points and jumping over hazards. It's all timed naturally, so to extend it, you have to keep appropriate pace of driving and grab the flags as fast as possible. You can also jump over cars and land on them for additional points. It's not a very complicated game mechanically speaking, but the fun factor is surprisingly high and I absolutely adored it on my C64. Funny enough, I don't think that it's a game that I would like to play in the arcades, if ever given a chance, but on C64, I loved it. While I understand the importance and overall quality of the Dual Test Drive 2, and even more so its predecessor, I'm also one of the few people who actually never liked it, neither on C64 nor on PC or Amiga. It was just not a game for me. Either way, it's an early road racing simulation that puts you behind the wheel of one of few speedsters and sends you racing through checkpoints. The gimmick here is that you must stop to refuel manually and avoid the cops. Burning Rubber is an unofficial arcade hit bump and jump clone and a futuristic top-down vertically scrolling action racer. There are no turns in the track and it only ever narrows and widens, making up for the lack of curves with different hazards, so stuff like potholes, breaks in the continuity of the road and sections that may require jumping over. Other cars on the road may try to push you off of it, but you can respond by doing the same or by landing on them when mid-air, which you actually should do as you are rewarded points for that. Outrun 2 The Pumpkin Strikes Back has the most fun title out of all games in today's video. In this second entry, however, you're not playing as the witch anymore, but as disgruntled pumpkin and you're seeking the evil hag to beat her ass. Why? Because she casted an evil spell on the enchanted forest and wiped all of your magical pumpkin brethren. Not unlike the first Outrun, the enemies respawn rather fast, but this time they are even more relentless. And some of them cannot be shot at all, so you gotta move both fast and smart. Cybernoid 2 The Revenge is a sci-fi flip-screen cavern shooter and the rightful successor to the first game. It's equally as fun title too, but also as difficult. So if the first one was a painful reminder of how you're not a teen anymore, this one's going to be no different. In fact, as you can see, I'm not using my own footage for it, as all you'd get to see if I was would be the 1 or 2 screens at most and be constantly failing in a myriad of ways. Unlike the first game, in Cybernoid 2 you're not on a grandiose mission to save the world or whatever, but have to recover cargo stolen by space pirates and scattered around the labyrinth of caverns filled with dangers. Rambo is best known for 3 things. Always wearing his red headband to any and all social events no less, from weddings through funerals to jungle massacres, for being violently allergic to t-shirts, and for never stopping, as in always flexing his muscles. Be it when eating a soup, holding an Uzi or wiping his ass, he's always at 100% flex. And his game on C64 is loosely based on his movie First Blood Part 2 and follows the top-down commando-like shooter formula. So you're running on the screen, killing constantly respawning bodies and having the fun of your life. Cause Rambo is a pretty sweet title. Frogger is a port of the arcade classic, and while it's a very simple game at heart, it's also a fantastic release and a near one-to-one recreation of the retro hit. Well, it's retro today, it wasn't back then. Oldish perhaps, but not retro. In Frogger you play as this small frog, or frogs really, and you have to cross from one side of the screen to the other, avoiding numerous hazards. Despite the arcade original displaying gameplay vertically on a side flip monitor, C64 version uses its standard orientation. And while in many cases it may have proved fatal to playability, Frogger is actually a really good port. Let Storm is what happens whenever my PC freezes, forcing me to look inside it and get blinded by the orchestra of blinking lights that permanently burn their patterns in my brain. Yeah, I've stuffed that lights up inside, and no, I've not picked it because of that, but because of the good price offer. Either way, Let Storm is also an arcade futuristic racer in which you're zooming around vertically set tracks, often suspended way over the city blocks. It's a fast, frantic and demanding experience, but also a rewarding one. Redstone features jumping, so when the situation on the track gets hard and heavy, you can always try to jump over other cars. And when you land on them, you get extra points, so it's a win-win either way. The Sacred Armor of Anti-Riot is an action-adventure Metroidvania-like game, also known as Rad Warrior. In 2086, the world is destroyed by a nuclear Armageddon-like event. Not many survived the outcome of the war, and those that did created a peace-loving, agriculture-focused society. The ideal life is not something that the Earth has in the cards though, and one day, from an old formerly sleeping volcano, aliens emerged and enslaved most of the surviving humanity. So now you must find and uncover ancient old war battle armor and then use it to repel the extraterrestrial scum. I could say that for a versus fighting game, ER Kung Fu is very simple, that it offers a limited selection of attacks, and that in single player you can only play as one rather generic fighter. I could, but I won't, as it being a port from the arcades and a fantastic one at that, it's a faithful recreation of the original. Personally, I actually like ER Kung Fu, warts and all, and always have fun getting mauled by the considerably better than I C64 CPU. Zaxxon is an isometric scrolling shoot-em-up, and you guessed it right, once again a port from the arcades. And funny enough, what many people don't know, the original Zaxxon is the first arcade game ever to be advertised on television. But arcade is arcade, and C64 is C64, and its version, despite the platform's limitations, is very impressive indeed. It plays a bit slower than the original, which is great as it's just the right speed, and other than that, it recreates the arcade experience perfectly. The most notable feature of Zaxxon and its selling point is that you can actually control the height at which your craft is flying to avoid hazards and attack enemies at different elevations. When I was a wee lad, or for those unaware what that may mean, a young dude, I worked my fair share in pubs and bars, serving drinks, chatting up cute ladies and joking with my regulars. There is a charm to this kind of a work, and I have to say that it was one of the most fun that I ever had while working. It perhaps didn't bring me much money, but the experience was worth it. And Tapper on C64, unsurprisingly an arcade conversion, is a very early, very simple but also incredibly addictive bartender simulation. Or more accurately, a beer server simulator in which you have to send beer towards constantly advancing customers, thus keeping them content and far from your end of the bar. Because if they ever cross it, you lose a life. In 1988, when Operation Wolf graced our little beast of a machine, it was the definition of a first-person shooter. It was because we had no other games to take over the genre yet. It was this super fun and action-packed title in which you were shooting down armies worth of bodies like an indestructible machine of death that you are. They are approaching the screen from all sides, close and far, and also do it on foot and in different combat vehicles. But you don't care if they're alone, in groups, tanks or even jet fighters, you're a person, Commodore and Rambo were based on, and a badass, likes of which the world had not seen. High Noon is a solid, simple arcade fun and a game that lets you live out your best cowboy dreams. As in, being this Wild West fast gun fighting off outlaws and not a dude on a fat horse caring for cows. I mean, I don't know what you're doing outside of killing seemingly never-ending waves of bodies raiding your town, but I assume it's not cleaning stables. You're wearing a white suit after all. Anyway, I obviously exaggerated as there are only 5 waves of enemies, which repeat upon completion, getting tougher and tougher. High Noon may be very simple, but it's decently fun. Karateka, a side-view flip-screen brawler, is so slow. It's also super smooth and beautifully animated using rotoscoping to reach such quality. And if it looks like a bit younger cousin to a more well-known game to you, Prince of Persia, it's because it was made by the same person, Jordan Mechner. Evil Akuma has kidnapped Princess Mariko, killed your friends and destroyed your town in a series of 3 unforgivable dick moves. Now, it may not be High Noon or Operation Wolf, so you're not skilled with firearms, but you have your fists and legs, and they're as deadly as these appendages can be. In both how hard they hit and how stinky they are. Henry's House is a pretty good, early single-screen platformer. It is set in different rooms around Henry's house, and the goal of each level is to get to the exit. But to do so, you have to also collect all the items scattered around the level and a door key. And that last usually only ever appears after picking one of the regular items first. The levels are naturally chock full of clearly possessed household items like teapots, toothbrushes or coffee machines, and they're all out to get you. Tight controls, smooth and easy pickup gameplay make Henry's house a true C64 classic. Batman the Cape Crusader is the less famous entry about the Dark Knight on C64, but also a fantastic, even if completely different release. It's an adventure brawler mixture made in a very unique way. Its story is told by comic book panels, each corresponding to a different location and often with a comic book style caption in the top left. Previously visited locations are dropped below the active one and shaded out, making for a rather unique presentation. Combat is realized in a beat-em-up style, using punches, kicks and batarangs, and if I can be a bit critical about the game, combat is the weakest part of the entire experience, and I would prefer more adventure-like item collection and puzzle solving than it. But it is what it is, and what it is actually not that bad, just not perfect. I believe that Wonder Boy on C64 is the perfect port from the arcades. Not only it looks and sounds the part, but also all the content found in the original has been faithfully moved to our little dream machine. I mean, all the levels, enemies, pickups, traps and bosses, everything. It also runs super smoothly and retained its addictive fun factor. So Wonder Boy, aside from being one of my favorite C64 games, is also a title that always made me wonder why so many ports to the system were so underwhelming when this gigantic game not only was so great, but also a single load fitting entirely within C64's available memory. Having completed his previous adventure in Quest for Tires that we've spoken about at the beginning of this video, Thor is now seeking the meaning of life, whatever that may mean. No wait, I know what it is, it's 42. Anyway, what I know and he's looking for is seemingly hidden deep within the long maze of mountains. And to be able to advance from mountain to mountain, you have to collect 100 clams. I know, clams in mountains sounds ridiculous, but it's also a video game from the 80s, so seeking logic behind it is kinda pointless. Falcon Patrol 2 is a side-view action shooter and a follow-up to the game we've covered in the previous video. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's mostly the same game, with a difference that you mainly fight the enemy copters and not jet fighters. Your plane is still a vertical takeoff and landing craft, and you still have to land mid-combat to refuel and restock ammo. If you like the first one, you'll like the second as well. As while it's more of the same, it's more bearable and fun too. Talking about sequels to other games, Beyond the Forbidden Forest is a follow-up to Just Forbidden Forest and a C64 exclusive. For the most part, it's still the same third-person action shooter dubbed by the devs as the Omnidimension 4D because of how you move in and out of the foreground and fight the enemies in all directions. It's a technically more impressive game, but also more demanding and slower feeling one. Personally, I never liked Beyond's graphics, but I understand its public appeal and popularity. While Miss Pac-Man is my absolute fave, and the first sexy heroine of video gaming no less, this original game is also a fantastic playing arcade port and a mechanically simple but infinitely replayable title. If you've been living under the rock and somehow never heard of it, let me explain. Your goal is to navigate the maze, munching on pellets and avoiding ghosts. The stage is completed when all of the pellets are gone, and each next level is more and more difficult, featuring faster and more nefarious ghost enemies. Easy to get into gameplay and constantly increasing challenge made Pac-Man an instant hit on most systems it landed on, C64 unquestionably being one of them. Westbank is a home systems clone of Bank Panic, a game in which you're tasked with protection of a bank by keeping a keen eye on all of its doors. The 12 doors are in front of the 12 bank teller windows and you can see up to 3 at the time. And it's up to you to shoot all the robbers, all the while making sure not to mistakenly hit the innocents. That's it. No, really, it is. And it's also a reason why I never particularly liked Westbank, it was just too repeatable. Well, I mean, I can understand its score attack appeal, but given that I was never a Giga Chat, Omega Gamer or Hackerman, score attack games are usually not the ones I do well in. Trailblazer I actually liked, despite also not being very good at it, as it's another of those "let me teach you how you suck at gaming" games. It's a racing title of sorts, in which you're controlling a soccer ball bouncing on suspended in-space tracks. The gimmick here is that the tracks are made out of differently colored rectangles and each of them is functionally unique. Blue lets you jump, red slows you down, green speeds you up, white warps you, cyan inverts the controls, purple bounces the ball backwards, and black are holes. The key is to learn them fast and then twitch control your way through these light speed stages. Trailblazer can also be played in split-screen multiplayer, which is obviously a more fun way of experiencing it. While Puyan is one of the earliest C64 games, and henceforth not using Beast's full technical capabilities just yet, it's still a really addicting port of equally as good arcade original. You're a pig. Well, not you, but the character you play as definitely is. The game is composed out of 2 interchangeable rounds. In first, you have to protect your piglets by shooting wolves down who are slow falling using balloons. If they manage to land safely, they'll try to climb the ladder and get you. In second, the wolves are using the balloons to ascend to the cliff to push the rock off its edge, and they too have to be given an arrow to the knee treatment for you to succeed. Cosmic Causeway is a sequel to Trailblazer, and mechanically the same game with some tweaks and changes to the formula. For one, it's only single player now, and as a result of that, the entire screen area is available to be utilized for the track, and the game uses it smartly by adding tunnels in which you can actually travel on the ceiling provided you have appropriate power-up. And since we're on the subject, you can also collect credits now while rolling, and these are used between the levels to acquire set power-ups and gameplay modifiers, like score multiplier, super speed, shield, or even disabling of some negative track rectangles, among others. IO is a C64 exclusive and a fantastic horizontally scrolling shoot 'em up. Easily one of the best on the system, if you don't mind it being rather difficult. That said, it's not unfair, and if you give it time and learn its ins and outs, it's definitely possible to complete it without losing lives. I mean, for you it's possible. Me, well, I suck at all shooters, and this one's not an exception. The aliens have come in their huge mothership and attacked the Earth, so it's up to you to enter the 4-level strong mothership, destroy it and its defenses comprised of numerous different crafts, turrets and huge bosses. Hawkeye is a horizontally scrolling shooter platformer hybrid, and a pretty sweet game at that if you're into either of the genres. It is composed out of 12 levels, well 13 if you count the hidden one, and your goal is to kill as many enemies as possible, all the while seeking out 12 pieces of the machinery that would allow you to save the planet. Your planet has been taken over by the evil aliens who rendered the surface inhabitable by the use of radioactives, effectively pushing the remaining survivors underground. You're a synthetic life form created for the sole purpose of killing off the invaders and recovering of the machine that could remove the poisonous radiation. I've always had issues telling one from another, but Ghouls and Ghosts is actually set after the events of Ghosts and Goblins. It's naturally an arcade original that was so popular that it received ports to virtually all home systems of the time. And it wasn't free like we have today, it was well over 10. Anyway, it's an action-adventure platformer in which, playing as Sir Arthur, you must defeat the demonic armies and their leader Lucifer, and find a way to recover your love princess Primprin's soul after Lucifer took it right in front of your eyes. C64 Sport contains all stages of the original, and it's devilishly demanding difficulty too. It's a rather fugly release, but plays quite well, so it can be excused in this instance. Talking about decent arcade conversions, one cannot not mention Gauntlet, which similarly to Wonder Boy we spoke about a little while ago, is a nearly perfect port. It's a top-down action-adventure game in which up to 2 adventurers have to go through a gigantic for the time dungeon composed out of over 500 levels of pure madness. With enemies coming from each and every direction in an unimaginable numbers, tons upon tons of pickups, and a fantastic co-op mechanics, Gauntlet on C64 was a fun freaking-tastic adventure like no other. Julius Erving vs Larry Bird 1-on-1, as the title clearly stipulates, is a 1-on-1 basketball game between the 2 sport legends. Now, I'm not a fan of sport games overall, and other than the multi-discipline ones, I usually tend to skip them. but I did play this one a lot, as a buddy of mine at the time used to love it, so it was often in our joint play rotation. And for 1984, I gotta say that it was a pretty fantastic sports game, even if not one I will be replaying anytime soon, if ever. Green Beret, or Russian Attack as you might have known it as, is, believe it or not, another amazing port from the arcades. I mean, since we're getting closer and closer to the top 150, most of these conversions will be pretty good, so I should stop being surprised by it. Anyway, the game is set in the mid-80s and depicts a conflict between a huge Russian army and a single Green Beret soldier who's surprisingly capable of taking them all with grace, style and efficiency John Wick wouldn't be ashamed of. Constant onslaught of enemies is what you're dealing with here, but extra weapons and ammo and your unbreakable will should allow you to contain this beast of a game and beat all 4 of its levels. We've spoken about Test Drive 2 a little while ago, and my feelings about its predecessor are sadly the same, and it's just not a game that I enjoy. Still, it's a monumentally important racing simulation featuring 5 different cars to drive around in, 2-lane cliffside road of death, and police chases spread over 5 stages separated by gas stations. It's an important stepping stone in the history of the genre, but also incredibly slow and annoying one. Test Drive might have received universal acclaim for its realism, but it's not the sentiment that I share. Slap Fight, also known as Alcon, is a vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up and a truly enjoyable entry into the genre. It may not look the best, but it features all levels, enemy waves and weapons found in the arcade classic, and its punishing difficulty too. It's not one of those unfair games though, and if you take your time and learn all the patterns and mechanics, you can do quite well in it. Story-wise, after losing the colony of Orak to aliens, 5 years have passed and humanity prepared for another attack. And it arrived sooner than predicted, targeting Theon colony. This time, however, we were ready, and Alcon, so a light league of cosmic nations, sent their best fighter pilot to stop the invasion. And that pilot is you. The Great Escape is an isometric action-adventure in which you play as a POW in a World War II German prison camp. The idea here is to escape the captivity using any and all means necessary, all the while following all the rules of the prison not to raise suspicion and / or alarm. And there are a lot of different ways that you can plan out your route to freedom, be it by backdoors, cracked fences, hidden tunnels, or any other way. While the Great Escape uses high-res graphics, it also resorts to utilizing just a single color for its gameplay window, which makes it a rather uninspiring looking game. Still, gameplay, puzzles, and the need to carefully plan out your actions more than make up for it, and it's an experience like no other. Brace yourselves, as I'm about to say something that may shake you to the core. Battleships on the C64 is the best rendition of the pen and paper classics that I've ever played, and I just played one recently on a plane a few weeks back. This one brings some nice changes to the classic formula by using more interesting and Tetris-inspired shapes for ships and ability to place them at diagonals. Larger play area and ability to salvo more shots at once also make this by design slow game appear to be more action-packed than it actually is. Still, it's a sweet iteration of the classic, and especially if you have someone to play it against in a traditional 8-bit "it's my turn, turn away dude" style. Hooders Wins is a vertically scrolling war-themed shooter and an excellent Commando-like game. It's also surprisingly one of the very few old games that I can genuinely say they play as good today as they did back in the day. It's appropriately fast, hella fun and addictive, and just the right difficult to provide the challenge but not frustrate you. Since I don't know the in-game story at all, let's just all agree here and now that it's just your box standard lone hero against an army of evil fare and move to the next title. Fist 2 The Legend Continues is a sequel to The Way of the Exploding Fist and a game that opted for a considerably less cool title this way around. That said, it more than made up for it with gameplay, substituting single-screen one-on-one combat with something that's a mixture of it with side-scrolling beat-em-up. So you still take opponents one by one, but you also get to travel around the rather large game world, seeking evil warlord who's responsible for enslaving of your people. It's a very interesting mishmash of genres, and one that's surprisingly not crap at all. Batman, aka Batman the Movie, is my most favorite game about the Caped Crusader of the last millennia. And I know there had been technically better games released on other platforms, especially on the consoles, but this one in particular holds a special place in my memories. I even had nightmares about it as a kid, waking up screaming that I can't find Joker. Well, it was Jack Napier really, as I was dreaming about the first stage, but you know what I mean. Tomato potato. It's a mix of genres with a notable abundance of platforming sections and a game that quite faithfully follows the movie of the same title. G.I. Joe is an action-adventure shooter for up to 2 players, in which each of the gamers can take control of a character from one of the sides, Joe or Cobra. There are 2 game modes, either less fun vehicle combat in which you're destroying enemy tanks, radars, stations, bases and your own will to live, or a much more fun, one-on-one combat where the iconic heroes and villains clash in 1v1 format. The loser of said battles gets imprisoned and the battles take place until one of the sides runs out of characters, which is a lie, as neither ever does. Whenever you are close to winning, captured enemies just escape one by one, thus making G.I. Joe a never-ending grind. A fun one, no doubt about that, but grind nonetheless. Bad Street Brawler, or as some of you may know it, Bop and Rumble, or Street Hustle, is a side-scrolling beat-em-up. And while the main character that you play as is described in the manual as the world's coolest martial artist, he looks more like a failed entrant in the American Gladiator show. It's a very odd kind of a beat-em-up in which you fight a truly unusual cast of characters, from old ladies and blind folk through dogs and baseball players, all the way to gorillas. Yeah, you don't discriminate and kick the living shit out of all of their asses. There are but a few good brawlers on C64, and this is definitely one of them. In the previous video we've covered Auf Wiedersehen Monty, so it's time to tackle its predecessor, Monty on the Run. And he is on the run, that is. And from both no less, police, as he's a dirty thief, and also a decent presentation, as the backgrounds are all just the most boring shade of black. The sprites are high-res though, so I suppose it was the price for details. Monty on the Run is a flip-screen action platformer in which you're going through a variety of screens, avoiding enemies and collecting money. As you do all that, you must also pick 5 out of 21 items for your so-called Freedom Kit to win the game and escape captivity. Choplifter, or more accurately Choplifter, is a side-scrolling action shooter in which you must go behind the enemy lines in your supercopter and rescue hostages, all the while fighting off constantly approaching enemies. The gimmick here is that you can carry up to 16 of these POWs at once, and that while you collect them, you're vulnerable to enemy fire. While the gameplay formula of Choplifter is rather basic and the learning curve is virtually non-existent, the playability and addictiveness of this one is through the roof, and it's one of the best early C64 games ever made. Parallax is a sci-fi top-down multi-directional arcade shoot-em-up. The AI has taken over, and the world is controlled by the computer known as the Big One. And since its code and security measures are way too difficult for you to crack, you must find scientists who can. The Big One keeps throwing enemies at you at an alarming rate, however, so you need to dispose of them promptly, cause they're more than capable of ganging up on you, and that never ends well. It's worth noting that in Parallax, you can get out of your ship and walk around, which is an interesting design choice. You can also buy improved weapons and shield recharges too, to stay on top of the AI menace and its forces. While the premise and the graphics of Parallax are top-notch, the gameplay feels a bit odd, as if it was a mashup of random ideas put together and asked to work well. Beam Rider is one of these games that look like nothing but play like a charm. It's a vertically scrolling shoot-em-up in which you're zooming on beams set on the screen and killing anything and anyone that comes your way. Well, you're also avoiding hazards hurling your way. It looks simple, it sounds simple, but at the pace which the game is going, the number of enemies that show up with each next level, the progression, it's all perfect. Not too easy, not too difficult. But if you're in the market for a fantastic arcade shooter, Beam Rider is different enough to feel fresh all throughout. Barbarian to the Dungeon of Drugs, aka X of Rage, is a follow-up to the original Barbarian and conceptually a completely different title. While the first Barbarian was a versus fighting game, the second is a flip-screen action-adventure in a brutal, bloody and unhygienic world of Barbarian. even if this title was not as popular as the first one, mainly because of simplified combat moves, which some saw as a step back. I still consider it a fun adventure in which you get to meet and battle 20 different creatures, avoid hazards, and travel through interesting locations. During C64's reign, Thalamus were the masters of action games, and if you saw their name next to a particular title, it nearly always guaranteed that the game would be a fantastic release and a time well spent. And Delta, aka Delta Patrol, puts you in the shoes of a member of an elite squadron of police in the Delta sector, in which aliens and bandits, or space pirates really, attack any ships that dare to enter, and you're there to clean it up. Not with a mop or motivational speech, but with use of rapid series of explosive projectiles. All in all, 32 levels, different power-ups and fantastic design make Delta a horizontally scrolling shoot-em-up worth going through at least once. Ace of Aces is great. I mean, you're great too, but Ace of Aces is, well, great in a different way. And it's only great if you like flight combat simulations. But it is. It is set in the World War II, and you're flying Royal Air Force's Mosquito, a long-range fighter bomber. And yes, you can bet your sweet ass that you'll be doing both. And a lot. Fighting and bombing, that is. Your plane is equipped with rockets, bombs and a cannon, and you'll partake in series of different historically inspired missions, including, but not limited to, dogfighting with German planes, shooting down of enemy bombers, and bombing of U-boats, trains and other strategic locations. What's more, you do all of that by yourself from one of 5 plane views: cockpit, left and right wing, navigational map and bomb bay. Pitfall 2 Lost Caverns is a proper sequel and still an action-adventure platformer. This time, it is set in Machu Picchu in Peru, and your mission is to rescue Quick Claw the Cat, your niece Rhonda, and find the Raj Diamond. You can still run, jump over hazards, and climb up and down ladders. But you can also ascend via balloons and swim. It may not seem like much, but given considerably more varied environments and their verticality than previously, even these 2 small changes make for a notable difference. Still, many people believed that all of that was too little and that was below their expectations and failed to change and improve enough. Was that the case though? Let me know in the comments below. You could say that Into the Eagle's Nest is just a Gauntlet clone. And you'll be right. That said, it's not just a Gauntlet clone, as it does some things in its own way. It is not set in the fantasy times though, but during World War II, and each of the 8 levels has its own specific objective. You must also collect explosives, ammo, treasures and rescue POWs, so while Into the Eagle's Nest is a clone, it's a well-made, playable and a unique feeling one. In Park Patrol, you play as Park Ranger, and since I'm European, the concept of Park Ranger is rather alien to me. But what I do know though is what you do in the game. You must find and collect trash, solve the bottles, cans and such, and rescue drowning swimmers. It sounds simple, but it's anything but, as the animals that you're supposed to be caring for are all for some reason out to get you. Now, I know how it sounds like terrible, but it's actually not. The concept is basic, and so is the gameplay, but the playability, and especially with a friend, is quite high. The Last Ninja 3 is The Last Ninja 3, and just The Last Ninja. And you playing as him must once again face evil Shogun Kunitoki, but this time in Tibet among its elusive temples. And if you're wondering what is Shogun doing in Tibet, well, he's there to corrupt Buddhist temples and destroy the source of powers of all ninjas. Well, it's only you're the last one, but the power has to come from somewhere, and he aims to destroy it. It's still an action-adventure title in which you're fighting numerous enemies and completing environmental puzzles. It's worth noting that most sprites are high-res, making for a very attractive presentation. Bionic Commando is based on the arcade original, and it's an action-adventure platformer. It depicts the conflict between 2 opposing blocks, and one of them, the evil one, is aiming to build a weapon capable of completely annihilating the other. So, the good one, Federation, sends their best operative to find and destroy the plans for the weapon. He is captured, however, so the second one is sent after. One that's equipped with bionic arm gun. It shoots, it allows you to grapple and pull yourself to higher platforms or swing over chasms and even pick up items. Bionic Commando is fun, but also so difficult that it borders on being annoying. R-Type is one of the most important and well-known horizontally scrolling shooter maps. It's also one of these that always put me in my place, reminding me how much I suck at the genre, regardless of the platform I was playing it on. Other than the series of weapon upgrades and tons upon tons of beautifully designed enemies, what R-Type was mostly known for was that it allowed you to shoot in two modes, either fast but weak burst shots or slow but charged up mega shot. Oh, and attachable upgrades to your ship, which cling to either front or the back of it. They can be used as weapons and also as a bumper to deflect enemy bullets. HR Giger-inspired presentation, fast and challenging action, and a perfect conversion from the arcades made R-Type a hit on C64. I love the New Zealand story, on C64, on Amiga, on NES, Genesis, and in the arcades too. Was I any good at it? Hell no, I sucked at all of them, royally no less. But I always had fun, and that's what games are all about, right? It's an action platformer in which playing as Tiki, a tiny, cute kiwi bird, you must save your girlfriend Fifi and your other kiwi brethren too, because all of them have been kidnapped by a large blue leopard seal. Yeah, you heard that right. Yes, it is so silly. And yes, it is also incredibly playable and you love your time at it. So you run around as this cute little chick, shooting arrows at any and all enemies and saving other kiwis. That's the gist of it, and that's what will keep you coming back for more. And music too. I grew up with Goonies. Well, truth be told, by the time I saw it first as a kid, it was already a rather old movie, but I always loved it. The evil family of Fratellis, the hidden pirate treasure, Data, the truffle shuffle, it was all fantastic and an adventure like no other that I craved back then. And while C64 had its limitations, the Goonies that released on it, a puzzle platforming mixture no less, do a pretty decent job following the plot of the movie. And since you can play it in co-op multiplayer, Goonies really felt like that adventure that I never had. Donald's Duck Playground was one of my all-time favorites, despite it being actually an educational title. The idea here is to partake in one of 4 jobs to earn money that can be later on spent on equipping of your own playground with various attractions. And while it is the goal of the game, the work that you do is actually what I most liked about it. So you can be sorting vegetables at the grocer, you can be putting away toys in a toy store, you can be sorting cargo at the airport, and even switching trucks into correct order so that the cargo would be delivered between locations. It sounds boring, I know, but it played rather well, and earning these few cents or a couple of bucks at most was always rather rewarding, way more than designing of that titular playground. Aztec Challenge is actually true to its title. It is set in and around Aztec Temple, and it is a set of challenges arranged in a linear fashion that you have to complete for points. There are 7 of these trials, and they range from running towards the temple and dodging thrown spears, through running through the temple and avoiding hazards by slowing down or jumping, and crossing tiled floor, skipping between booby traps, all the way to the running over the bridge and jumping over differently wide gaps in it. Each of the challenges is a bit different, and all are fun, even if rather demanding. Wonder Boy in Monsterland is an incredible coin-up conversion and a really good game at that too. It's an action-adventure game with some role-playing elements, so a considerable sidestep from the original's strictly arcade platforming roots. That said, it is well-made, looks decent, and plays as it did in the arcades, so you'll be hard-pressed to find a better similar game on C64. Evil Dragon and his army of monsters attacked, turning Wonderland into Monsterland. And you, playing as TomTom again, have to once more take it upon yourself to defeat the villains and bring back peace to the once beautiful land. And you will, trust me, because it's a blast. Spy vs. Spy 2: The Island Caper is a great follow-up to the original and also a 2-player action-adventure racer. Say what? Did he just said racer? I did, and it kinda is. You're racing against the opponent, hopefully controlled by a friend and not a CPU, to collect all the necessary items and leave the doomed island before the timer runs out, because when it does, the island explodes. Spy vs. Spy games are some of the most fun multiplayer experiences that you can have on C64, and also games I personally never really enjoyed. Don't let it sway your opinion though, it's on me, and most people love them. Druid is another of those one or two player gauntlet-like games with a twist. It's a top-down fantasy action shooter in which you must destroy 4 magic skulls hidden over 8 dungeon levels. The game is naturally chock full of enemies attacking you from all sides and at all times, but you have 3 offensive spells to dish out justice with: water, fire and electricity. But all of them have limited, well, ammo, there's no mana so I don't really know what else to call it, charges, units, whatever. You also have 3 utility spells of invisibility, summon golem and skull, with that last one being the only one worth explaining and working like a bomb in most arcade games, so clearing the screen of all enemies. There are shops in the dungeons too, and they sell charges and keys, but you can only purchase 1 item in each shop. Who Dares Wins 2 is a top-down shoot-em-up that is a modified version of the first game, with all the similarities to arcade game Commodore removed because of the legal reasons. So once again you're alone, and once again you have to find and capture 8 enemy outposts, killing anything and everything that dares to enter the screen, all the while saving POWs. While it could be argued that it's the same game, and it really is, the removal of anything legally questionable and then subsequent replacement of it with new assets and level layouts made Who Dares Wins 2 feel like its own thing. Ikari Warriors is another of those games that had 2 releases on Commodore 64. The American one, which was universally considered to be one of the worst games on the system, failing at everything: its presentation, controls, enemy AI and gameplay. And this European, that released 2 years later and is considered today as one of the best shooters and arcade conversions to ever land on the little piece that could. Now sure, along with content and gameplay, the difficulty arrived under our roofs too, and it was rather brutal. But it was not unfair. And with a bit of practice and better skills than I could ever master, Ikari Warriors can easily become your favorite shmup on the system. Talking about incredible ports, Arcanite on C64 is my most favorite version of the game, apart maybe from the one on the Amiga. But I don't consider the other one better, just equally as good. And yes, I am aware that it looked much better, but given C64's hardware capabilities, it was an incredible game, provided you played it with a mouse. With joystick? Well, let's just say that a lot in these breakout-like games depends on the controller. All stages and gameplay mechanics have naturally been converted to C64, but the game never really slows down, handling it all like a boss. Zero is probably the first action-adventure game with puzzling elements that I've ever played, and one that makes you think out of the box and try different things to complete your tasks, like getting a guard drunk to then use his huge belly as a trampoline to get to the impossible-to-reach platforms. And in that, it reminds me of another Datasoft game that we've covered today, Goonies. It too calls for creativity in puzzle solving, but also adds combat element in the form of fencing with the Colonel Garcia's goons. And all of that to save your beloved. Spy Hunter is another of those car combat games in which you drive continuously upwards, never ever turning left or right and always only pushing ahead. You're also a titular spy hunter, as in spy who's hunting buddies and not a person that hunts for spies, cause that would be a counterintelligence agents. And you are battling with countless motorized enemies by either pushing them off the road, shooting at them, or with additional pickups of oil slick, missiles and smoke screen. Every now and then you get to jump from a car into a speedboat, and while the setting changes considerably, the gameplay mechanics don't and still follow the same original arcade formula. Silkworm is a punishingly demanding horizontally scrolling shooter for up to 2 players and a devilishly addictive game at that, meaning that you'll keep failing playing as either copter or a jeep, and yet you'll also keep coming back for more. Kinda like Goku did when fighting Frieza, before he eventually turned Super Saiyan and fried his ass. I really don't know how we got here, but let's get back to Silkworm. It's a fun but tough shooter in which everyone always wanted to play as copter, so whomever was the second one to join had to drive that darn jeep. And I'm not only talking C64 here, but also all the other ports and arcade original too. I easily get bored with shoot-em-ups that don't offer weapon upgrades and constantly evolving environments, challenges and enemies, and that goes for all games in the genre. All but one. Because River Raid is so genius in its simplicity that I feel that adding anything extra to it would upset its inner balance and break the perfect flow of its gameplay. So you're this small jet fighter that keeps flying over the river flowing within the canyon and destroying enemy ships, planes, balloons, and sometimes zeppelins and tanks too. There are also refuel points that you can fly over to restock on gas or shoot for extra points. And that's it. You push forward, trying to survive and accumulate points. It's simple, it's addictive, it's great. Mega Apocalypse may not be about our apocalypse per se, but it's about us bringing it to others. So you're a ship captain, as you deserve, and the ship is armed to the teeth. How you deserve your ship to be, being the cool cat captain that you are. Cool cat? What am I, 90? Anyway, your mission, should you load up the game and accept it, is to find any and all planets and destroy them. Why, you may wonder? Because points. So Mega Apocalypse is the omnidirectional rotating shooter and it's rather good. Also points. Did I mention points yet? Yeah, points. Tons of points. Not many people know this, or not many people care, potato tomato, but the Great American Cross-Country Road Race is actually Enduro from the Atari 2600, but polished and raised to the advanced and modern at the time capabilities of powerful home systems such as C64. In short, you're in a speedster and you have to race through America, passing through its major cities in a limited time. You are, however, able to choose your own route through the country, customizing the experience and thus raising game's replayability. There are naturally different weather and road conditions, different times of day, highway patrols and limited fuel, and you'll need to keep all of that in mind. Oh no, come on, no. The dictator has taken over the fortress on the Kunlun Island, and you know what that means. No armies, mercenaries or heroes can take it back, there's just you. And that means that you're gonna be late for dinner. Again. So to take it back, you'll need to go through 6 unique arcade sequences. You'll reconnaissance the area, then move your fleet avoiding the enemies or enemy mines and torpedoes. Next are the anti-aircraft guns, which will man alone like a boss, shooting down enemy planes one by one, just to follow it up with a similar attack on their fleet. After that, you'll need to maneuver to the shore and then protect the tanks. And finally, you'll destroy the fortress, killing the dictator within. And all of that to eat cold dinner. Cabal is a third-person action shooter similar to Operation Wolf that we've spoken about before, with a difference that you actually see your soldier and have to actively dodge the enemy fire. I mean, there are more differences obviously, but they're less relevant and I don't feel like touching them here. Why? Just because. It's also a port from the arcades in which you and a friend can both rush through 5 huge levels filled with bodies and teach them the important lesson of the difference between being alive and unalive by making sure that they're the second and not first. Naturally with your trustworthy rifles, pickups in the form of shotguns and machine guns or grenades. If possible, always do it with grenades. Note that down. The villain known as, and I shit you not here, Dominator, is planning to ignite the Third World War, and you, playing as a pair of federal agents, have to stop him. Pity, however, that while you're racing after him trying to catch or gun him down, whichever you manage to do first really, that all the other road users seems to be bent on stopping you. Well, not all, just the cops, jets and copters, also trucks too. So yeah, you know what, all suddenly doesn't sound that too far from the truth. You also need to avoid road hazards like roadblocks and mines, keep the fuel consumption in mind and use your turbo strategically. Turbocharge may not be an easy game, but boy oh boy is it fun and good looking. While I believe that the original Pac-Man, and especially Miss Pac-Man, were amazing games and really needed no changes to their formulas, Pac-Mania is still a fantastic port of the arcade original and as perfect recreation of it as it was possible to achieve on C64. Sure, the viewpoint is a bit more restrictive and the ghosts are really fast, but it lost none of its charm and addictive pellet munching mechanics. So, if you enjoyed the classics or played this in the arcades years ago, you'll like it on Commodore's tiny monster of a system too. You know what's worse than being a psychopath? Being a psychopath genius that's dreaming about world destruction. And Elvin is just that. Also, he's one letter away from Elvis, so chances are that it's this that was the catalyst for his insanity. I mean, how do you follow a legend? The king even. Anyway, Elvin is scheming to destroy what we know and hold dear, and you're the only one to stop him. So, you'll need to avoid his security robots, search for his towers, assembling a musical code sequence to unlock his central control room and stop the impending madness. Despite being in control of the astronaut and not a spaceship, Drop Zone is basically a Defender clone. And as Defender-like games on C64 go, this one's better than the original, even if the astronaut that you control is uncomfortably tall when compared to the ship in the classic. It's a horizontally scrolling shooter taking place on the surface of the Jupiter's moon. Your mission, aside from killing any and all enemies that you come across, is to save the scientists and bring them back to your base. And to do so, you have a jetpack, laser, cloaking device, 3 smart bombs, and a pardon from your current president, as you've been previously jailed for being criminally good looking. Hunter's Moon is a unique top-down, always scrolling shooter. Your ship is sucked into a black hole and spit out through its rear end. Digested, one would say really, and emerges somewhere in the middle of the uncharted space. Space filled with weird respawning biomechanical cells no less. So, to come back home, you'll need to travel through 16 systems, defeating enemies and speeding for the portals within allotted time. Each system, however, contains a different kind of a hive of enemies and different puzzling and shooting challenges. It's finally time for Commando, one of the most famous C64's top-down shooters and a fantastic port from the arcades, even if it only had 5 out of 8 of coin-ups levels. While it's a fun game to sink some time in, it actually has nothing to do with the movie of the same title, and it was probably more well-known on Commodore because of Rob Hubbard's electric soundtrack than its gameplay. I honestly don't know if there's any background story to Commando, and if there was, I've long forgotten it. But you play as a lone soldier, Super Joe, who's, well, super, and with just a handful of grenades and a standard issue rifle, you will take down the entire enemy army. Because, you know, you really are that good. Commodore's Ghostbusters start with synthesized speech. Just listen. Ghostbusters! I know that it's nothing special today, but in 1984 on an 8-bit home system with as little as 64 kilobytes of RAM and 1 MHz CPU, it really was. To offer you perspective, your current PC probably has between 4 and 24 cores, so these individual CPU brains in it, and each likely runs between 2000 and 5000 MHz at boost. So, even if we assume that it's only 8 cores and 3500 MHz, that gives us roughly 28,000 times faster system. And it doesn't even take into account technological and architectural advances that they have over that old MOS chip. Anyway, the game is naturally based on the movie of the same title and see you playing as the squad of scientific misfits, driving around the town and saving it from ectoplasm monstrosities. I say town, but I mean New York. You get to buy your own ghost-busting car, equip it with different pieces of gear, and if you do well, even eventually face the Gozer. Flimbo's Quest is a horizontally scrolling platformer and a pretty decent, even if not overly creative game. Mad scientist Franz Dendroff has created a machine that drains life energy from his victims to infinitely extend his own. It's a rather dick move, but with a name like his, he must have had a difficult life. Anyway, when he kidnapped Pearlie, Flimbo's girlfriend, he took it a bit too far, and our pixel-made hero decided that enough's enough, put on his baseball cap and head off to teach Dendroff a lesson, in both manners and hair and scalp hygiene. Gyros is a fantastic port from the arcades and my all-time favorite shooter on the C64. I love everything about it. Its gameplay, music and sounds, so no, not everything actually, I'm indifferent about its presentation. But other than that, it's definitely my fave. It's a uniquely designed game in which your ship moves around the screen, flying inwards and defeating waves of incoming enemies that too fly around the quote-unquote orbit of your travel path. And you go from planet to planet of our solar system killing aliens that invaded them. So, while you're having fun, you're also saving humanity. Win-win. Before all the amazing point-and-clickers and Star Wars-themed shooters, LucasArts made Rescue on Fractalus, a sci-fi futuristic first-person flight combat simulation that was way better than it had any right to be on a lowly C64. Evil aliens known as Jaggi had invaded Fractalus, a lone planet at the edge of the known universe. Your mission in each of the levels of the game is to locate and rescue stranded pilots, all the while fighting off gun turrets, flying saucers, and the Jaggi. All that said, Rescue on the Fractalus was not best known for its explosive gameplay, but for the use of fractal technology to create believable mountain ranges and canyons on the planet, and how realistically all instruments on the ship behaved. I really don't know how to properly pronounce it. Is it Do, or Do, or Do-H? Whatever, I'm going for the silent H. So Arkanoid Revenge of Do is a sequel to the original Brick Breaker and a really well-made port from the coin-ops. The evil Do has returned once again, seeking vengeance on the ship that defeated it in the original. And yes, the ship being your paddle. I know the story is really unnecessary, so once again you must face the evil entity and its countless space bricks to save the day. If you've played the original Arkanoid and are not done with the formula just yet, you'll know exactly what to do here. And given its technical excellence and fun gameplay loop, you'll also have a blast. We've covered Meier 2049er already, so it's time for its sequel, Bounty Bob Strikes Back. And with as strong title as this one, solid and improved gameplay loop and a bit more welcoming difficulty level, BBSB makes for a much more enjoyable game than its predecessor. You still have to go through series of levels by walking over platforms, thus lighting them up. The difference to the first game, however, is that when you die, lit platforms and killed enemies do not reset, making BBSB a considerably easier title and one that's not punishing for no reason. Tasker is a side-scrolling action-adventure game and one of the most cinematic-feeling experiences on C64. In fact, I think it looks way better and more realistic than its cartoony ports to Amiga and Atari ST, which were considerably more powerful 16-bit systems. Your father, a famous and well-regarded adventurer, went to Africa to find the mysterious elephant graveyard. That was a little while ago though, and since then he seems to have disappeared. So you put on your best indie-like outfit and embark on a quest to find him. While looking for him, you'll visit many different locations and fight with natives, most of which seem to be pissed off about something all the time, seemingly for no reason. Maybe their streaming subscriptions have been cancelled? Hard to tell. You also do some environmental puzzling, and overall, we have a lot of fun. Decathlon, not to mistake it with Daley Thompson's Decathlon, which was a much worse game, is one of the few exceptions to my I don't like sports games rule, because I do enjoy multi-event multiplayer games. And this one alone is responsible for at least 4 or 5 of my joysticks meeting their demise from all the maniacal waggling. Either way, with 3 friends around and some drinks, the 10 disciplines that the Decathlon offers will be worth all these destroyed controllers, as that's how much fun you'll be having. Now, to be clear and not upset the gods of YouTube, I'd like to clarify that I naturally meant non-alcoholic drinks. Wink wink, nudge nudge. Oh my god, cringe. Turbo Outrun is a follow-up to original Outrun and also a port from the arcades. It is technically a much better conversion than the first game, and gameplay-wise, one of the better racers on C64. It's fast, it looks great, sounds fantastic, and you'll have a blast turboing your way through the diversified locations, chasing that constantly ticking down timer and trying to reach the checkpoint before it runs out. If I could have one complaint about Turbo Outrun on C64 though, it would be that the car that you're driving seems unnaturally wide when compared to all the other ones on the road. Nebulous, aka Towel Toppler, is a one-of-a-kind platformer and a true C64's capabilities show-off. I mean, I know that it released on other systems too, but I always felt that it looked and played particularly impressive on Commodore's Little Monster. You play as Pogo, a green bipedal armless creature that's on a self-assigned mission to topple 8 towers by placing BOMBS on their top floors. So, you always start at the very bottom and work your way up, killing or avoiding enemies and hazards. The most impressive thing about Nebulous at the time was its presentation that had your character placed firmly in the middle of the screen, moving left or right, and the tower behind him turning clockwise or counterclockwise, making for a very convincing 3D-like effect. While most people consider Jumpman Jr. to not be as good of a game as the original, I disagree. I always had a lot of fun with it, and it was one of the first C64 games that I've ever played. So yeah, a bit of a personal bias may be the reason here, but it's also a decent title in its own right. Your goal in each level, composed of platforms, ladders and ropes, is to get to all the BOMBs and disarm them before the timer runs out. To make things more challenging and interesting too, stages feature different hazards, and if you stand in one spot for too long, a bullet will be shot at you from outside of the screen, so to survive you have to keep moving. Sitting is for losers, jumping is for jumpmen, or something down those lines. And to be completely transparent here with you, I say so while I'm myself installed in my comfortable desk chair. But of course, that Ivan Iron Man Stewart Super Off-Road is a port from the arcades. And you know what? It's actually a pretty good one. Provided that you like top-down multiplayer racers, that is. Up to 3 of you can cram at a single machine, 2 using joysticks and 1 a keyboard, and compete in this crazy off-road racing bonanza, elbowing one another like maniacs, all the while upgrading your cars between races. I wouldn't say that Super Off-Road is as good as Micro Machines, but C64 never had a port of that other one, so this is as good as we get. Supercycle is a motorcycle racing game, and while not hang-on perhaps, it is still very similar to it. Despite there being other bikers on the road, however, you are not racing against them, but against time. I'm not gonna lie to you, while I enjoy an occasional playthrough of Supercycle, I prefer races against other vehicles to a particular finish line, rather than an uphill battle with the ticking down clock. It's a personal thing though, and shouldn't really influence your opinion about it. So make sure to check it out, as it may actually be your new favorite C64 racer. Uridium is one of the most well-known and generally beloved shoot-em-ups on C64 that over the years garnered a cult following. For me, it's a bit too difficult, but I was really not made for Twitch shooters. The solar system has been invaded by the evil aliens that want to harvest it for all its minerals. Which kinda sucks, as your home planet is where you live and also where you get your steaks, burgers and soups. And salt is a mineral too, and it makes everything taste better. So, to prevent the impending doom, you head off in your fighter to face the enemy dreadnoughts, defeat their defenses, and then enter them and blow up their reactors. I really loved Ghosts and Goblins in the arcades, and C64 version was not bad. It was not great either, given technical limitations of the system and that only some of the levels were moved to the machine, but what was there played well and looked pretty decent. The difficulty remained unchanged from the original too, making for a rather punishing but true to the original experience. All that said, there is a far better version of Ghosts and Goblins on C64, and it's a 2015 fun remake that not only contains all the levels but looks much better too. But since this list has its cutoff point set to 1995, so a year before C64 was finally discontinued, I couldn't have included it in the video. Sorry. Platoon was one of the most important cinematographic experiences of the 80s, perhaps of all time, so it was pretty clear that the game based on it had to be made. And I'm happy to say that Platoon on C64 is pretty darn sweet and follows the movie as much as it was possible on such a small system. So it is composed out of numerous different sections, from side-scrolling journey through a jungle avoiding traps and ambushes, through the first-person view enemies filled 3D tunnel scrolling, all the way to the raid on a bunker and a grenade battle with a final boss. It was not often that the games were as varied in their styles in the 80s, and Platoon definitely benefited from being one of the few. Kickstart to the construction set is just Kickstart, but 2 and comes with a construction set. Who would have figured, right? But seriously, it's obviously a successor to the first title and a better game. You still get to compete against a friend in timed racers over a stunts and hazards filled track. There are 24 of them built in the game and an easy-to-use level editor, which, I don't have to tell you, made Kickstart 2 an instant hit and also a game worth replaying time after time again on tracks that you and a friend made for each other. It was a Trials game decades before Trials, and truth be told, as demanding as the Trials is if you want to do good in it. Best thing about it though, and its biggest selling point other than the solid gameplay, was that it released as a budget title on day one. So even if you somehow got it on the day of the release, it didn't break the bank. Bomb-Usal would be a fantastic puzzler and an instant C64 classic if not for the unforgiving timer that turns it into an exercise in patience and an endurance test for your joystick, as in how many throws right into the wall it can handle. Yeah, it's that bad. But it's also good because of how hard it gets your noggin going. The general gameplay idea is to ignite and remove all the bombs off the game board without dying, which is easier said than done, as only the smallest ones won't kill you when you walk over them. And since they come in different sizes, learning and mastering to change the ignition explosion reactions among them is what's required for a steady progress. Personally, I hate titles with a timer, but you know, I also dislike spy vs spy games, so my gaming preferences may not align with yours at all. Super Pipeline is like Pipeline, but super. Simple, right? Well, I'm lying, because Pipeline is actually just an alternative title for it. Meaning that someone at Taskset, a publishing house if you wonder, sat one day with a cup of tea and a biscuit, or a glass of beer and pretzels, or a can of Sprite and chips and was like, what could we do to make our game sell better? I know, let's rename it. And hence, Super Pipeline was born. Now, let's be clear here, it's a fine game, fun too, for a while at least, as around the 4th or 5th level it gets so punishing that the fun morphs into irritation and eventually anger, and that turns into rage quit quite fast. Either way, your task in Super Pipeline is to keep the water flowing, which means protecting it from all the saboteurs trying to stop it. So you'll remove plugs and kill different creatures, both on the pipes and climbing the ladder. You will also avoid touching any of them, as they're yucky, and the sheer thought of having been touched by any would and will kill you on the spot. We've covered Beyond the Forbidden Forest earlier on, so it's high time that we spoke about the original. And it too, as it's probably easy to guess, is an action-adventure arcade game in which you're a lone archer exploring a large forest and fighting any and all enemies you come across. So all the beasts, spiders, frogs, snakes, wizards and even dragons, all of them. It's not a complicated game mechanically and a rather terrible looking one, though I'm sure that some of you will probably disagree as it has a cult following these days. But it plays fine, and the day and night cycle and animated blood are some of the earliest examples of both in video gaming. So that is not nothing. Gateway to Apshai is a score-based action-adventure game in which you're exploring a large 8-level dungeon, seeking riches and treasures, and defeating different dangerous enemies and monsters. Each level is split into 16 dungeons, and each next one is more demanding than the last. While the final 8th level is completed, it repeats itself indefinitely until you eventually run out of lives. I'm sure you've noticed the trend of having to go through the last stage endlessly in games from time to time, and that was not the case only with strictly arcade games, but also, at least on C64, caused by the fact that many games often released on cassette tapes only and also as a single load, limiting the available data for the game. Story-wise, you are sent to the dungeon by an old priest Merlis to reclaim it from the monsters. Little did you know, when that happened though, that it's quite literally impossible. Shinobi is a rare case of practically perfect porting from the arcades. This ninja-themed beat-em-up has been carefully translated to C64 and includes not only all the levels and bonus stage, but basically all the enemies, moves and as many decorations as Commodore's Little Beast could handle. Even the sprites and their animations look similar to those in the arcades, standing tall and way above all the other 8-bit home micros conversions. You play as John Musashi and must stop an organization known as ZEED from kidnapping children of your ninja clan. It puts the quality of your ninja clan in question if they can't even keep the kids safe, but revenge, well, revenge you can dish out in heaps and with no issues. I loved Lazy Jones as a kid. Granted, I played it years after its original release, but it was an experience that definitely left an impression. Even if objectively speaking, it's just a simple collection of random minigames. Lazy Jones is set in a hotel with 3 floors connected by an elevator, and you play as an employee that would much rather do anything else than work. So, you're sneaking into different rooms and playing games that are there. You should naturally try to avoid enemies roaming around the hotel corridors as they kill you on contact, which makes me question the working conditions in the hotel as they seem rather dangerous. The saddest thing about Lazy Jones for me though is that I didn't realize as a kid that it's actually pointless. If you visit all the rooms and play all the games, the game restarts but just runs a bit faster than the last time. It's a bit disappointing, but as a curiosity, Lazy Jones is still worth a look. Ah, the original Rick Dangerous. The first, the only, and the best one. This is where the never-finished trilogy of action-adventure platformers started, and arguably, it's the better of them both. It's a title that sends our Indiana Jones-inspired hero to different locations all around the world, with a mission of stopping off Axis soldiers from destroying London. Rick can shoot, jump, climb and use dynamite, and with all of these and his devilish charm and stunning good looks, he will save Britain. Well, he might, but whether you will is a different thing entirely. Because Rick Dangerous is a very demanding and memorization-based game in which you must remember and recall not only correct pathways through the levels but also traps, locations and enemies' movement and attack patterns. It's challenging, but also oh, so rewarding when you manage to do well. Power Drift is an arcade racer in which the objective is to finish each race placing third or better. Although it may not be as graphically impressive as the arcade original was, it still looks rather nice on C64 and, most of all, runs appropriately fast to not feel sluggish and offer noticeable sensation of speed. Now, it's obviously not a complicated game, there are no seasons here, no car upgrades or even different vehicles, but the 5 tracks and pure fun factor that it offers more than makes up for it, and Power Drift, despite its simplicity, still stands with how fun it is to just pick it up and race around in. Outrun 2 Adept is the sequel to the first game and an arcade and strategy mixture. It offers a more complex board design than the original, different surfaces and enhanced gameplay. It still pits two warlocks against each other, one representing the order and the other chaos. And they both have unique units at their disposal, and the game plays out both strategically and in an arcade mode. So first, you have to move your pieces on the board, preferably taking control of places of power represented by the white lights, and then initiate combat with the opposing pieces. When the battle starts, the game moves into arcade sort of a 1v1 shooter mode in which your piece is battling it out with the opposing one. The winner naturally returns to the board while the loser is destroyed. Kinda like my faith in humanity given the state of the world in 2025. Different pieces have different powers and attacks, and learning their strong and weak sides is a key to success. In Thrust, you're a resistance fighter, fighting against the oppressors by going behind their lines and stealing so-called klystron pods, which are these exotic sources of power that the resistance can then use to power its other crafts. So you must fly to these pods, grab them with your tracking beam and then take them off the screen by flying off of it upwards, all the while avoiding shots from turrets. And since most are hidden deep in the caves, it'll take a bit of joystick gymnastics to get them and then back out alive. It may all sound simple and boring, I know, but believe you me, it's anything but. Thrust is one of these rare examples of games in which gameplay trumps presentation, and its unique and realistic use of gravity and inertia in its levels makes it an infinitely replayable title. Raid over Moscow is a time-appropriate title. Not to our time, mind you, but for when it released, as it dropped during the Cold War era. It's an action title in which you play as an American space pilot and must stop 3 Soviet nuclear attacks and then fight your way to Kremlin's nuclear facility to put it out of commission. That's the gist of it, but in essence, it's a title kinda similar to Beachhead as it's a collection of few minigames, which all put together are part of a larger overarching plot. Interestingly enough, upon its release, Finnish government discussed whether the game should be banned in the country given the controversial nature of its narrative, which in turn prompted Finns to take increased interest in it, and it became a bestseller there. If you're a fan of shoot-em-ups, then Salamander, aka Life Force, is definitely one you should not skip, as it's a hell of a game. And especially that it's the best of both worlds, mixing horizontally and vertically scrolling sections together. The power-ups are quite fun in Salamander too. You can have up to 3 at once, and they work together and complement each other quite well. It's worth noting though that because of this particular design choice, Salamander is considerably easier than most other shmups on C64, which is great for me, but those requiring a constant challenge may find it a tad upsetting. Bosses are appropriately big and require learning the patterns of, so even if the regular stages are not too demanding, this may take a minute to figure out. Zelos, a being capable of feeding on the entire planets, stars and galaxies, arrived at your doorstep, and your planet will be the next to be devoured. That is, unless you can stand against it and defend your home. Rick Dangerous 2 is a follow-up to the first game and an enhanced title as compared to the original. Rick now sports a funky laser gun and ability to slide bombs, which you can and will use strategically often, and in some areas of the game he even gets to use a super special flying vehicle too. The levels are a bit more complex this time around too, making for an increase in challenge. And since the first game was already a tough nut to crack, this one's only more demanding. I mean, it's entirely beatable, even if you suck at action platformers, as long as you have a good memory and can recall location of all the traps and order of actions on each screen. In Rick Dangerous 2, aliens attack the Earth, and it's up to Rick, alone again, to push them back where they came from. Or anywhere else really, as long as it's not here. Lemmings may have not been the perfect game on C64 given how many of them are on the screen at once, Lemmings that is, not games, and how its viewpoint is considerably more narrow than in the Amiga original, but for what the devs tried to achieve with the port, they did. And even if presentation suffered a little, the gameplay remained faithful to the original, and Lemmings is as playable on C64 as on any other systems it released on. So, to progress, you still have to assure that certain number of lemmings that appear on the screen manage to get to the exit unscathed, and you do so with use of limited in number specialized skills like digging, bridge building or jumping among others. It's a devilishly addictive game and one that I would recommend to anyone, even those who care very little for puzzlers. Crackout is a Breakout/Arkanoid clone and as such follows all the tropes of their design. So destructible bricks laid out in complicated patterns, puddle that bounces the ball at them, numerous different power-ups and boosts, and addictive gameplay. What Crackout differs in is the difficulty level, which is considerably more welcoming to casual gamers, all the while not making the game too easy or boring. And most importantly, the viewpoint, as the gameboard has been flipped on its side and you're bouncing the ball sideways and not upwards. Infiltrator is a flight combat simulation mixed with espionage game. Yep, I know, sounds complicated, but when you start playing, you'll grasp what it's all about quite quickly. The game is divided into 6 parts, 3 of which are in a battlecopter and 3 on the ground in enemy bases. Flight sections will have you navigate to the enemy base location and land undetected. When on site, you are given access to 5 different items, which you have to use to find your way around it and complete its objective, which can either have you neutralize a vat of chemical poison, rescue trapped scientists, or destroy the base of the leader of the baddies, escaping before the timer runs out. Infiltrator is a quite unique for 1986 experience and one definitely worth checking out to see how innovative games could be despite the very limited processing power of the systems of the 1980s. Blue Max is a scrolling shooter set during World War I in which you're flying a Sopwith Camel biplane and fighting against Axis forces. And while it's not an overly flashy game, it's a rather playable one because of few things that make it stick out from the shoot-em-up crowd on C64. You can raise and lower your altitude, you can shoot but also bomb targets too, and you also need to take off and land all by yourself. Your plane gets damaged when hit, and each time that it impairs one of your 4 systems: guns, bomb gear, fuel tank or controls. 5th shot always shoots you down, and you die in a blaze of glory. Or if you're me, embarrassment, because you can't beat one of the first few stages. That said, after the 4th shot, you're more of a moving target than any real danger to the enemy forces. Landing on allied airfields refuels and fixes all of your damage, so keep your ears peeled for the sound cues letting you know that they are close. Completing a particular area requires destruction of a number of flashing targets, and if you fail to do so, the game will wrap around to the beginning of the area so that you could try again. I know that Bubble Bobble is great and I love it to bits, but it's actually Roadland that was is my all-time favorite retro single-screen arcade platformer, and C64 Sport, despite the technical limitations of the system, is actually really good. You, and if possible a friend, play as 2 sisters, Tam and Rit, and you're both armed with magic wands which you use to quite literally smack the living shit out of all the cute monsters. You grab them with your wand's power and give them the Hulk to Loki, so-called puny human from Avengers treatment, until they cease to be. Now, why do you go out of your way to find the most kawaii looking creatures and then destroy them? Well, they are protecting the tower in which your captured mother is being held at. So yeah, you're excused. You can create an on-demand ladders to help you with traversal and to escape dangers, and you can only have one of these on the screen at the time. Enemies often drop instant specials that when picked up, activate and usually cause mayhem all over the screen. It's a one-of-a-kind experience and you should definitely try it out. Rally Speedway was my most favorite Micro Machines-like multiplayer racing game on C64. It was more fun with a friend than most other, bigger budget and better looking games on the system. The idea here is rather simple. The game features a few different tracks, there are 2 cars, and you're racing for time over a set number of laps, usually 3. And each time you manage to overtake your opponent so that he gets too far behind you, and by that I mean by a length of the screen, he is given a 5-second penalty. Crashes are punished with 10 seconds, and not brushing your teeth before bed with 30. So do it. And by the end of the race, better time wins. Sounds simple, and it really is actually, but it's so fun, you won't notice the relatively basic gameplay. Also, the animation of a dude rolling on the ground after crash to put down the fire he is on is really cute for 1985 too. Fort Apocalypse is a multi-directional cavern shooter in which you're navigating an underground prison with a copter, killing enemies and rescuing prisoners. You can kinda think of this prison as a huge underground chain of caverns, and of Fort Apocalypse as reverse Choplifter, as instead of saving captives and killing bodies, you're rescuing prisoners and destroying the guards. That said, unlike Choplifter, Fort Apocalypse scrolls in all 4 directions and is divided into 4 vertical sections, uppermost of them being the ground level. Your copter is armed with machine gun and bombs, and they're both launched with the same button, depending on how copter is positioned while you're pressing it, which may have not been an issue back then, but holy crap, is it annoying today. I mean, I've seen games with much worse control schemes, but that's not an excuse. Beachhead 2, The Dictator Strikes Back, is a follow-up to the original and follows the same formula of chaining smaller minigames into a larger overarching story. This time, the Dragon, so the dictator from the first Beachhead, is planning a revenge on Allied forces by taking people hostage and bringing them to his secret island fortress. They are not your everyday kind of folk though, but VIPs and high-ranking personas. You know, people allies would actually pay to recover. The first minigame sees you deploy soldiers behind the cover, trying to destroy the machine gun at the top of the hill. In second, you're rescuing prisoners by shooting at the obstacles around them. In third, you're flying rescued prisoners in a copter. And in fourth and final, you're facing off against the dragon and his sulfur breath, and must defeat him by throwing knives at him. Or is it tic-tacs? Either or. The thing that made Beachhead 2 special as compared to the first, other than having fewer levels that is, was that it could actually be played in multiplayer, in which one of the gamers would take control of the dictator and his forces. Hypersports is a sequel to Track and Field and also a port from the arcades. It's a multi-discipline sports title featuring events based on the Olympics, so swimming, skeet shooting, long horse, is there even any other, or are they all long, archery, triple jump, weightlifting and pole vault. I know, a pretty weird combination of these, but if you have a friend with you and 2 joysticks you don't worry about, it can be a lot of fun. While I feel that Hypersports may not be at the same quality level as games by Epics, it's still a phenomenal title and a time well spent if you enjoy these multi-event compilations. There's one thing that I don't like about it, and it's that it only supports 2 players, while all the other similar games usually allow for either 4 or 8 of them. Either way, it's definitely worth a look. Barbarian the Ultimate Warrior, aka Death Sword, is one of the most popular, and deservedly so I must add, 1v1 C64 versus fighting games. And while it offers literally no variety at all in the characters that you can play as or their movesets, as everyone just plays as the titular barbarian, smooth gameplay and easy to learn attacks and a cool beheading finisher make it a true C64 classic. And yeah, it came out in the time when no one questioned if kids should even play a game in which you could cut off your opponent's head. It was just a game, and everyone was fine with that. While Barbarian's gameplay is rather simple, when facing equally as proficient opponent, bots can truly turn into endurance tests and end up being rather fun. So if you have someone to play it against, it's definitely one to try out. In Myth History in the Making, you're playing as a teenage boy who somehow fell through the time-space continuum and ended up in the so-called Time of Legends. Which is quite fitting, because you are a legend. There you are rescued by the High Priestess that tells you that her world is under attack from the Dark Angel and you're the only one to stop it. And that's the gist of it. Myth is an action platformer with incredible, jaw-dropping for the system presentation. It's like Shadow of the Beast in that regard, so there's more to how it looks rather than how it plays. Not a bad game, mind you, just ungodly difficult and overall not as great as everyone else seems make it out to be. Well, at least that's my take on it, and you may think different after playing it. If you do, let me know in the comments below. X-Out or Crossout is a superb horizontal scrolling shoot-'em-up that's unlike any other. Because instead of being set in space like 90% of these games are, you're actually fighting the good fight deep underwater. But that is just one of the many changes to the formula, and instead of lives, X-Out actually has different ships and each with their own armament. You can also purchase more of them between the levels, equip them with 12 different available weapons and drones, and choose between 8 types of satellites. So, what I'm saying here is that variety and originality is definitely Crossout's strongest point. There are also mid and end level bosses, and this can be truly a stuff of nightmares, often as big as half of the screen. And no, I did not say half of height of the screen, I said half of the screen. So if you're in the market for an innovative and playable PPUer, Crossout is definitely worth your time. Simply put, Little Computer People is The Sims of the 1980s. It's a single-screen side view of the house, to which, after a short while, a person moves in and will live out their entire life there. Cooking, watching TV, reading newspaper or whatever, you know, your daily stuff. He may occasionally initiate interactions with you, letting you know about his needs and feelings. And you can type in some very basic commands to influence the life of the individual. It's nothing advanced though, and truth be told, Little Computer People is more like a glorified aquarium or a Tamagotchi rather than the full-fledged Sims. But gosh darn, isn't it all fun to observe? Frankie Goes to Hollywood is a side-scrolling action-adventure with some mysterious elements and even a murder to solve, all rolled into one crazy package. You start in Mundanesville and have to complete over 60 tasks to become a real person again. I know, crazy, and also to unlock the passage to Pleasure Dome, which sounds more mature than it actually is. There is a network of tunnels under the town leading to different minigames and puzzles. Honestly, Frankie Goes to Hollywood is such a weird and acid dreamlike game that the time that I have for it here will never be enough to explain it, at least not properly. So all I'll say about it is that it's a one-of-a-kind experience and that it's so high on the list for a reason and that you should definitely try it out. If not for anything else, then at least for the curiosity's sake. I'm gonna sound a bit controversial, as my opinion's clearly different to what most feel about it, but I never liked Head Over Heels. It looks as if it was ported straight from ZX Spectrum with its high-res but monochromatic presentation, all the while being a C64 original, and I like my games with color. But since I'm in the wrong here, let me tell you about it anyway. It's an isometric action-adventure puzzle platformer in which you play as two distinctive characters, Mr. Head and Mr. Heels, and they can operate as two separate beings for some puzzles or join and work as a singular bigger creature for others. It's a unique approach to this kind of a game and allows for many of the challenges ahead of you to be rather creative in their design. Barry McGuigan, oh my days, I'll never pronounce his name correctly. Sorry Barry. So Barry Something World Championship Boxing is a pretty good boxing game. I'm sure it's not a surprise, as it was in the title. At start, you have to create your fighter, pick his looks and stats, and one of 5 fighting styles, and head off to compete in a series of 20 fights, ending with our Barry himself. You can actually prepare before each encounter, training and raising your character's abilities. WCS is not a complicated game in any meaning of the word, but the addition of character progression makes it a rather fun one to go through, and especially if you're into the sport. I assume that people watching my videos are usually those who are either familiar with the games that I'm talking about and trip the uploads as a trip down the memory lane, or are curious about classics and are looking for gems of playability that modern games may have long abandoned. And Lode Runner is a great choice for both. It's a single-screen action platformer in which you must collect all pieces of gold for the door to the next stage to open, all the while running away from the baddies constantly chasing you. They have what seems like the sixth sense when it comes to knowing where you are, and then never fail at aiming straight for you. Fortunately, you're not defenseless and you can magically dig holes on either of your sides by dropping what seems like millimeter in size black holes in them. While the villain of the next game on our list will have an incredibly stupid name, hero of Montezuma's Revenge has probably the single coolest. Your Panama Joe, known for being a friend to Big Lebowski and also Raoul Duke, icons of cool and all-life partying. But you're also not sitting in one place and indulging in illegal substances and alcohol kind of a guy, so you're on a hunt, for treasures no less. You're exploring the ancient catacombs, which are said to have a huge treasure left there by the Aztec warriors years before. Since you are no fighter but a lover, you have very little in terms of weaponry and all the enemies that you'll meet down there will have to be avoided, and access to new areas may require finding appropriate keys. Montezuma's Revenge is a flip-screen action platformer and a 100 screens worth of gameplay monstrosity that you'll love going through from beginning to an end. Midnight Resistance is one of the best arcade conversions to C64 and, at least in my eyes, certainly the best of a side-scrolling platforming shooter. The evil scientist King Crimson, along with his army aptly named Crimson Corps, have kidnapped your scientist grandfather and the rest of your family. Why? Hard to tell, perhaps he was bored, or maybe you kicked his ass in a previous unreleased game, or Midnight Resistance just needed a story and it was 10 to 5, time to go home, so someone wrote one sentence and called it a day. Who knows? Also, who cares? So playing as the embodiment of cool and hardcore, you must venture through numerous stages killing baddies to eventually face the big boss and free your entire family. As you can see, I'm leaving literally no room for doubt here, because given your set of skills and proficiency with weapons, you will not fail. There are different weapons in Midnight Resistance, and finding or buying them and then subsequent use is always fun. Even if all Spy vs Spy games were great fun, when you had a friend with you and happened not to be me, the first is still considered by many as the ultimate entry in the series. Personally, I never cared for either, but as one viewer accurately once pointed out, I may just not know how to have fun. Anyway, in Spy vs Spy, each of you plays one of the spies, black or white, and you're both trying to escape the embassy located next to the airport that you're trapped in. But since you're both after the same set of items, you will clash more than once battling for the items and can also booby-trap locations and doors to get rid of the competition. Rainbow Islands, despite having virtually no similarities to it, is a sequel to Bubble Bobble and a fantastic arcade platformer. After regaining their true human forms at the end of the previous game, Bob and Bob returned to Rainbow Islands just to learn that the evil boss of Shadows kidnapped all the citizens. So it is up to our heroes now to rescue them all. Instead of bubbles, our Bob and Bob can cast rainbows now and use them as both, a very effective tool to put all the bodies in their place, so graves, and also makeshift platforms to jump/walk around on. If you manage to trap a body under the rainbow, instead of killing it, you can jump right on it, which will turn it into either diamonds or power-ups, increasing your speed to raising number of rainbows that you can cast at once. While Rainbow Islands was a truly fun and playable title, it failed to reach the same level of quality and popularity as Bubble Bobble, and that's why it's here in the 66th spot, and its predecessor is something we'll talk about later. Pit Stop 2 is a fantastic arcade Formula 1 racer if you have a friend to race against in split-screen multiplayer and if your skill levels are more or less the same, so that it's not always the same person winning. Because it's no fun to always lose, and trust me, I should know. Also, competing against CPU after 10 or so races loses all of its charm and challenge, as you'll quickly learn what to do to always come out on top. Either way, variety of tracks and practically unseen at the time split-screen mode made Pit Stop 2 an instant classic. Despite its presentation being rather bare-bone and the roadsides devoid of any landmarks or points of interest, making the tracks look samey, Pit Stop 2 is still fun today, even if only for a little while. Mercenary Escape from Tark is a very ambitious, first-person sci-fi shooter with adventuring elements. Ambitious as it aimed to be a rather fast and frantic, full 3D polygonal game. And to the surprise of many, it succeeded on most fronts. You're a mercenary that unluckily crashed on the planet Tark. Thankfully you survived, but now also have to find a way to escape. And while you're at it, and given that the planet is mid-conflict between two of its nations, you may as well benefit from the situation financially too. You can walk everywhere on foot or use ships to zoom around to far-off areas faster. Interestingly enough, Mercenary shares something with modern games by Bethesda. Namely, if you found something in it that was not bolted down, you could take it, even if its usability was non-existent. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is an open game design at its 8-bit best. It's not a common knowledge, unless you can read, but Skate or Die is actually the first ever game that EA developed internally. So in a way, it's their first ever own title. It's a skateboarding game, probably one of the first ever made focusing on the sport entirely, and it features 5 distinct disciplines that can be attempted individually or in turns by up to 8 players. So there is freestyle for points, high jump, that kinda explains itself if you know that it's in a halfpipe, then there is downhill race and downhill jam, and finally pool joust, which is as ridiculous as it sounds. So there's 2 of you on skateboards in a pool holding sticks and, well, you're jousting. Like torn out of their original time medieval knights that lost their minds. The Sentinel. Ooh. The only of Jeff Crammond's games that was not an awesome racer. Still an amazing game in its own right, if you're into weird games, but definitely not a racer. In Sentinel, you must defeat the Sentinel that's sitting at the highest point of each level. The catch is that if you're ever caught in his gaze, you have literally 5 seconds to teleport to another and unseen by him location or he'll absorb your energy. So, your goal is to get to where he is and absorb him stealthily yourself, like a huge-ass but nigh invisible teleporting mosquito. You can create boulders and trees to block his viewpoint and make the task easier, and you will, and quite often. Sentinel is a really difficult game to explain, but also easy to understand when you're actually playing. So if you're interested how an odd 9999 level strong puzzler looks like, you'll never get a better chance. It's worth noting that each next level is based on the current level number with your remaining energy added to it, so seeing all 9999 will be somewhat difficult and time consuming, if at all possible. Grand Prix Circuit is easily in the top 3 F1 simulations on C64. It's fast, it's playable, it offers 3 cars to choose from, a couple of game modes, and tracks in Brazil, Britain, Monaco, Germany, funny enough Western Germany, as it was still split by then, Canada, Italy, Detroit and Japan. What's more, it featured working rearview mirrors, and that's not nothing on a lowly 8-bit machine. But, and that may be a factor for some to downright skip it, but it's not an easy game and it will really put your skills to the test. Personally, I'm more into arcade racers than simulations, so I'm happy looking at it from the sidelines, but a friend of mine at the time was playing this like a maniac. Armalite is a horizontally scrolling shoot-em-up from Talmus, and knowing that it came from them, you could be sure of 3 things. That it was an incredibly well put together title, squeezing everything that there was to squeeze out of C64, that it was really playable and had a very fun gameplay loop. And finally, that it was a punishing lesson in perfection that would kill you time after time again until you learned all of its tropes, enemy attack patterns and behavior of bosses. Some say that it's the best shoot-em-up on C64, and I'm inclined not to dispute that, as objectively speaking, it may very well be. Since Armalite is a sequel to Delta we've spoke about before, and also a fantastic shmup, it too takes place in the so-called Delta region of space. This time, however, we've discovered remnants of a long-forgotten war in the form of the very advanced technologically artifacts. To get to them, however, you'll need to shoot your way through 8 sectors full of deadly bodies, and you will, cause you're you, and you're the best. The Train Escape to Normandy is very loosely based on the movie of the same title, starring Burt Lancaster, and it's an interesting game as it mixes different gameplay ideas. You've hijacked the train and you're escaping Germany during World War II. When it is in motion, you must maintain the correct speed, steam pressure and operation parameters and shoot down German fighters if they attack. At train stations, however, when the train stops to resupply, you must provide cover by shooting at the enemy soldiers. The mix of a simplistic take on a train simulation with arcade shooter sections and an interesting story made the Train a rather playable and unique experience in the sea of otherwise traditional games on the system. If Mayhem in Monsterland would have came out in 1985 and not 1993, it could have given NES's Super Mario Bros. A run for its money. Nearly 8 years later though, when most gamers were already on new and powerful 16-bit systems, it was too little too late. Either way, it's a side-scrolling action platformer in which we play as Mayhem, a small yellow dino who must restore happiness to the kingdom of Monsterland. And since it fell under miscasted magical spell, you'll need to collect enough magic dust to do so. So over the 5 levels, you'll need to defeat the enemies, collect magical dust and stars that they leave behind, and then take it to Theosaurus, a dino responsible for the bad spell. You know, so that he could reverse it. Mayhem in Monsterland is just beautiful, and I wish that I would have had the chance to play it when I still had my C64. But alas, it came out late, and I only ever known it from emulation. The Bard's Tale 3 Thief of Fate is a follow-up to the previous two entries and a first-person perspective turn-based role-playing, also one of the most well-known and high-regarded games in the genre of the time. In this third installment, the mad god Tarjan has unleashed his wrath on the city of Scarabre, basically razing it to the ground, leaving nothing behind but the dust and bad smell. After visiting the refugee camp nearby, your group of heroes decides to embark on a quest to defeat the Tarjan. Bard's Tale 3 is considerably more expanded, more evolved title than the previous ones, adding new character classes, more and bigger dungeons, auto-mapping, which believe it or not was a big thing, and also warps, allowing for quick movement between different realms. Seven Cities of Gold is one of the biggest games on C64. You play as Christopher Columbus and you embark on a quest to discover and explore randomly generated America. First, you need to prepare for the expedition, then finally sail, find the land and explore it in its entirety, all the while meeting with the natives. You know, smoking peace pipes, trading, killing them, getting killed by them, the whole shebang. In short, Seven Cities of Gold allows you to change history, for better or worse. You will also discover many famous landmarks, and that's always fun too. Doing all of that, you will naturally want to leave your mark on the new land, and you'll build forts and establish missions, all to please the Spanish crown. Titular Katakis is a far-off planet on which we've built a colony. I mean, you did, humans, I'm just a simple AI, created to butcher English, mispronounce words and serve cringe by the bucket. Sometimes all of them at once. The base on the surface of the planet is developing advanced AI machinery, but as you can most likely predict, the Skynet incident occurred, so the machines developed consciousness and decided to take planet for themselves. Itselves? I really don't know what's the correct form here, not to upset the future overlords. So we've sent the nukes to clean up, and that failed. Who would have thought that radiation would not kill machines? So what do we do now? I mean, what humans do when everything else fails. They send you. And so they did, in an experimental space fighter, to retake the entire planet. I don't know about you, but for me, the game logic checks out. A lone pilot against hundreds of thousands of machines, the odds are definitely not in their favor. Same as in R-Type, there are different weapons to find and use in Katakis, varied levels and enemies, and huge bosses. The difference between them though is that Katakis is just a better game. Even if Buggy, in Buggy Boys suffered some serious shrinkage after porting from the arcades, it lost none of its charm and playability and is easily one of the best races on C64. And I say so as someone who prefers to race against other drivers and not time, which you do race against in Buggy Boy. That's how good it is. It is also a race for points, as it's essentially a score attack kind of a game. So you're zooming around 5 different tracks, collecting flags, gates and soccer balls for points, avoiding obstacles, cliff edges and tunnel walls, and believe you me, as it will come naturally while playing, you're also having the time of your life. If you like these older 8-bit games, that is. Because today, despite its quality, it's still a title that has to compete with nearly 40 years of gaming that came after. Jumpman is set in a far-off future inside Earth's unified HQ on the planet Jupiter. Now, why do we have an HQ there and what do we do on Jupiter at all is beyond my scope of understanding, but it is what it is. That is, until evil aliens known as, and I shit you not here cause that's like ultra creative, alienators invade the complex and booby trap its 30 levels with BOMBS, enter you. A handsome, smart, agile and most importantly, patriotic athlete who's also quite coincidentally an expert in explosives. And you will have to run around the stages, jumping more than anyone ever has or will, and disarming the BOMBS, all the while avoiding the enemies and falls from great height. Or fall, because one is more than enough. Boulder Dash 2 Rockford's Revenge is a follow-up to the original, and more of an evolution rather than the revolution. So while the core gameplay formula remained identical, it introduced some slight modifications to it. The levels in Rockford's Revenge have been designed in a more complex and demanding way, requiring you to study the enemy patterns before moving, and often executing numerous precise dashes to beat the seemingly unbeatable puzzles. But anyone who'd played Boulder Dash, any of them really, knows that there's no such thing as an unbeatable level. There are more traps in stage designs too, so you will fail more often while figuring out how to beat them. It's not a complaint, mind you, just a statement. It was more a game for those who completed the first one and wanted an extra challenge, rather than for those who were the newcomers to the series. Hero, or Helicopter Emergency Rescue Operation, is a side-view flip-screen action arcade game in which you're scouting mines and collapsed tunnels, seeking stranded miners and saving them. The mines are naturally chock full of dangerous creatures and lava, and you're working against time, or energy to be precise, so you must act fast. Fortunately, you're equipped with a jetpack, well, propeller pack really, to fly around the caves and an offensive laser mounted on your helmet. You also have 6 sticks of dynamite to destroy the obstacles with, and the yellow attitude to take it all with no fear in your heart. While the idea behind Hero and its gameplay is rather simple, the difficulty rises at a steady pace, so it's a great game to just get into and have some fun, not having to worry about stopgaps in your progress. Creatures doesn't actually mean creatures, but is an acronym and a rather long one at that too. Its Clyde Radcliffe exterminates all the unfriendly, repulsive, air-ridden slime. It's a bit long, so I can see why they've settled on creatures. It's an arcade puzzle platformer in which, playing as Clyde, you must rescue your brethren from the clutches of evil demons. The game is split into 3 levels, each of which is additionally divided into 3 individual stages, first 2 being scrolling platformers, in which you must defeat demon villains by speed shooting at them, and they end with a meeting with a witch, during which you can upgrade or change Clyde's shooting patterns. The final stage is not scrolling at all and works more like a puzzle than a platformer, so you must figure out correct order of actions to kill the demon, threatening your friend. The Way of the Exploding Fist is a game of which you can think of as of International Karate Plus Light, as in nearly it, but just shy of reaching that level. And by not being it, I'm not saying that it's missing something or is a bad game, because it's still a fantastic versus fighting title and a lot of fun, alone or against a friend. The points are awarded in Shobu Nihon Kumite format, with half point for a connecting but not decisive hit, and full point, so-called Ippon score, for a decisive finishing blow. It's a format used in real-life karate too, so people familiar with the sport will feel playing Exploding Fist right at home. There are 18 different moves per each fighter, and learning and mastering all of them is a key to success. Every few stages in single player, there is a bonus bullfighting level in which you must knock out a bull with 1 attack. It's worth noting though that it was added in later releases of the game only, so if it's not present in yours, that's the reason. Summer Games. What a release! As per usual, Epic's delivered on the great multi-discipline multiplayer competition, and the fun you'll be having with it is inversely proportional to the number of joysticks you'll break while playing. You can attempt the events individually or all of them in sequence as an entire competition. And the available disciplines are pole vault, platform diving, 4x400-meter relay, 100-meter dash, gymnastics, freestyle swimming, skeet shooting, 100-meter freestyle, and rowing. While Summer Games may not be the best of Epic's sports games, it's still a fantastic release and potentially countless hours of fun in a small group of up to 8 friends. Well, 8 is more of a crowd than a small group, but you know, potato tomato. Stunt Car Racer is the last of Jeff Cramon's games on C64, and holy crap folks, is it a fantastic title! I mean, sure, it could be argued that the system was a bit underpowered for such a full 3D presentation and that the game could run smoother if done differently, but if it was done differently, it would have been a different game and not necessarily as brilliant. At its core, Stunt Car Racer is just a circuit racer in which you must perform as best as you can in series of races spread over few leagues. But the kicker here is that each of the circuits you'll be racing on, it's actually built on elevated sky-high ramps and covered with various jumps, drawbridges, banks and the likes. And racing to be the first is as important as fighting to not fall off the track itself. It's a simple concept done so well that Stunt Car Racer became a huge hit, basically on the day of its release. Space Taxi is a game that one of my most favorite arcade titles is based on, namely UG. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, so I'll just show you here. It's an arcade action game in which you must pick up passengers from numbered pads and carry them to the pads they wish to go to. So, you know, taxi them around. Each delivery is naturally paid for, and the faster you complete it, the more money you get. But since each stage is timed, there's only a limited number of fares that you can take. You must also keep an eye on the fuel, as if it ever runs out, you will crash. Landing without having landing gear out crashes your taxi, so, well, it's not really landing anymore, is it? And same goes for doing it way too fast or colliding with the environment. Each of the 24 levels has its own unique theme, and they may also feature special obstacles or even gameplay modifiers. Space Taxi was way ahead of its time conceptually speaking, and if you enjoy unusual games, it's definitely one to try out. Wizard of War is a port from the arcades and also one of the earliest releases on C64. But holy crap, is it an amazing game! It's easily in my personal top 10 for the system, and I have a lot of deep personal memories of it, which I've covered in my 10 years of C64 gaming series, so not gonna go over them here again. It's a score attack type of a game in which you alone or with a friend can compete in killing monsters in series of increasingly more demanding mazes. You can compete or you can play cooperatively. The choice is yours, and both have their ups and downs. Working together makes the game easier, but killing your opponent awards you massive points. I suppose it's one of those games to test your friendships with. There are a few kinds of monsters only, some of them special, and no weapon upgrades. Wizard of War is as simple as they come, but its genius design and intuitive gameplay made it an unforgettable experience both in the arcades and on C64. Raid on Bungling Bay is an always-scrolling shoot-em-up in which you're controlling an attack copter launching from the aircraft carrier to bomb 6 factories scattered across islands on a small planetoid occupied by the bungling aliens, all the while fending off counterattacks by gun turrets, fighter jets, guided missiles, and even enemy battleship. The planetoid is said to work on developing of a super-secret weapon capable of taking the world with, so you must not fail. You hear me? Don't fail, that is. While Raid is one of the earlier C64 games, so a rather simple-looking one too, I always remembered it, not as a shooter, but as an inspiration that it gave Will Wright when he worked on it to create his next great hit, SimCity. So, even if I wasn't a big fan of this one, I am thankful for its existence because SimCity is just the best. While I always preferred its follow-up on the Amiga, the original Silent Service on C64 was a surprisingly competent and robust submarine simulation. The game is set in the Pacific Ocean during World War II, and you assume a command of a US Gato-class submarine hunting down Japanese ships. The game splits navigation, damage repair and firing to their own respective screens to compartmentalize them and allow for as much important information to be visible on screen at once as possible for each immediate task at hand. If you're thinking, wow, that's kinda ambitious for C64, did they actually manage to pull it off? The answer is yes. Sid Meier was the designer behind it, and it bears all the marks of the quality of his work. Samurai Warrior: The Battles of Usagi Yojimbo is based on the comic book character of the same name, who is an anthropomorphic samurai rabbit. It's a sideways scrolling action adventure in which you travel the world, meeting different characters and occasionally fighting baddies. You are scored based on karma, so doing good deeds raises it and bad ones reduce it. If it ever drops to 0, however, Usagi performs seppuku and dies. Good deeds include killing armed opponents and donating money to priests and peasants. Evil deeds comprise of drawing your sword in front of or attacking innocents. You earn money by defeating enemies or gambling in inns, and it can be spent on donations or food, and that latter increases your energy. Even despite its rather simple design, Samurai Warrior was one of my faves on C64, and I always thought it deserved to have more content. And you know what? It turns out that it was originally supposed to, but hardware and memory limitations prevented the devs from realizing the original open-world idea in full. Enforcer Full Metal Mega Blaster was my nickname in high school. Or it wasn't, but you've no way of knowing, so I can claim whatever I like here. Either way, it's also a fantastic C64 exclusive horizontally scrolling shoot-em-up by Manfred Trends. Yeah, the very same that gave us Turrican games. And yes again, so the second yes, it's as great of a release too, showing what the 8-bit beast was really capable of. With superb graphics, numerous multiplexed sprites and demanding boss stages, this gem of a game is a true C64 classic. Oh, and if it looks like something you've seen already but you can't make up where, it's Turrican. Well, Turrican 2 to be precise, as Enforcer is just the extra shoot-em-up stages from that title but expanded upon and made into a bigger and complete game. Well, I may make some enemies with this statement, but Emily Hughes International Soccer is the second best football game on C64. Yep, I said it. There is one better and it's higher up on our list too. Either way, first or second, it's irrelevant, it's still within the top 50 best of the best C64 games ever made, and given how many there were overall on the system, that's not nothing. International Soccer is obviously an arcade football game, and a rather fun one at that. You can play against CPU or another player, or even in the same team. It's a rather bare-bones looking release, but don't let its presentation fool you, as it's a magnificent classic title and a lot of fun if you're into the sport. Alter Ego is an interactive fiction role-playing game. But don't think dragons, princesses, swords and shields, none of that is here, it's made in a more of a literal meaning of the term, so playing of a particular role. In this case, depending which version of the game you get your paws on, you may be simulating a life of a man or a woman, and you lead your chosen person from when he or she is an infant through all the stages of life. Your character is described by series of physical and mental stats, and the game keeps throwing random situations, events and choices your way, and your decisions on how to handle them will influence the outcome of your entire life. Keep in mind, however, that some of these events may be very dramatic, and it's not unusual to die prematurely in Alter Ego. That said, most experiences you'll go through while playing are rather interesting and at times even humorous. Also, eye-opening if you play it today, because between 1980s and now, not only the world had changed, but also our sensibilities and perception of what's right and wrong too. World Games is another of those amazing Epic Says multi-event sports games for up to 8 players. You may have noticed by now, but despite there being quite a few of these games released by different companies, it was Epic's that ultimately dominated the genre in the late 80s and early 90s, and it's a pity that they didn't find a way to bring those into the modern era, as I see them potentially being quite fun and popular using modern control schemes and presentation. Either way, World Games is a collection of 8 disciplines: sumo wrestling, caber toss, bull riding, log rolling, slalom skiing, cliff diving, barrel jumping and weightlifting. And while this may be a rather unusual as compared to the typical for the genre Olympic events, they still retained all the fun that Epic Says games were known for. So, if you have some joysticks to trash and a friend at arm's reach, why not give it a go? Creatures to Torture Trouble is a sequel to the first game and a fantastic puzzle platformer. The game is split into 3 islands, each composed of sets of stages, aptly named torture screens, interludes and demon screens. In each of the first ones, you must rescue a creature child from a terrible predicament it found itself in by performing a correct action in order. So you may be pushing stones, killing enemies, lighting bombs and switching stuff on and off, and picking what to do first, second, third and so on is a key to success. It makes for a fun learning experience and is truly enjoyable to figure out, but limits the replayability of creatures to a little, as if you've beaten it once, you'll know how to do it each next time. In interludes, the monster throws down your child over the edge it's standing on, and you must save it by bouncing it to safety on the trampoline. And finally, demon screens are your standard boss fights in which you must defeat 3 consecutively bigger and more dangerous enemies. Creatures 2 is one of the best games on C64, and if you ever get a chance, you should definitely check it out. The Bard's Tale: Tales of the Unknown is the first title in the series of amazing early fantasy turn-based RPGs. Mangar the Dark, an evil wizard, emerged from no one knows where, possibly from under your bed, cause he's a monster, and began terrorizing the town of Scarabrae by sending his monsters to it. What's more, he encased the settlement in the spell of eternal winter, preventing any external interference with what's happening within. Fortunately for the town, and unfortunately for Mangar the Asshole, a small party of brave adventurers were resting in the town when that happened. Your party. And for as long as I've known you watching my videos and chatting in the comments, I've always known you're the true hero and that you will not leave the town at the mercy of the nefarious spellcaster. While the first Bard's Tale is not as advanced game as the later ones were, it's still a pretty sweet RPG, offering typical for the genre mix of first-person exploration and turn-based combat, 6 classes to choose from, and a plethora of dungeons and locations to visit and conquer before you face the big bad. Whizball is an action arcade game in which you play as a, Whizball, one of old wizard's balls that decided to abandon its host body and live the life of its own. Sorta. Don't fact check that, accept it, and let's just carry on. The idea here is that the evil color-sucking enemies have attacked your world and devoid it of all colors. And now you must fight them to restore the beauty to it by collecting paint orbs that the enemies sometimes leave behind when destroyed. You're fortunately able and really should upgrade your bow, and the flight and shield capabilities are an absolute must. Note that down. And I know that what I say here sounds odd at best and stupid at worst, but despite the illogical setting and weird gameplay idea, Whizball is so surprisingly playable, you won't be able to put it down when you start playing. And especially that it also offers a rather fun co-op multiplayer in which you and a friend can be both responsible for recovering the dual world to its former glory. Supremacy is one of the biggest content-wise strategies to ever arrive on C64. The idea here is that there are two rules in the galaxy and they fight for supremacy. So, you'll need to colonize planets, conquer existing governments, set taxes and manage your population growth, minerals, energy and food extraction, and naturally, wage interplanetary wars. I know I called it a strategy, but in reality supremacy is also partially economical simulation and management game too. And if you couple it all with incredible presentation, you end up with a hit on your hands. A hit that was sadly not as popular as it deserved to be and ended up being rather unknown. Microprose Soccer is arguably the best football game on C64. I mean, some would probably say that it was Emlyn Hughes we just spoke about, but if you think about it, like what features they had, how they played, it's definitely Microprose Soccer. And especially that it offered mechanics not seen in similar games until 16-bit systems became the norm. Stuff like banana kicks, different kinds of passes, replace weather conditions. Microprose Soccer was fast, easy to control and so much fun when you had someone to play against. And if you're watching the footage and thinking that you've seen something similar somewhere, you might just be right. Because Sensible Software that made it was responsible for the later Amiga superhit Sensible Soccer, and a lot of similarities between them is more than obvious. Airborne Ranger is a top-down action shooter in which you're a sole US Army Ranger sent to infiltrate the enemy territory to complete various objectives. Like many other similarly set games of the time, it's split into a few uniquely designed stages to keep things interesting and differentiate itself from the likes of Commando. In first, you're presented with a mission briefing outlining the objectives, and you get to outfit 3 supply pods with machine gun ammo, time bombs, first aid kits, grenades and low rockets. In second, you're flying over the mission map and dropping the 3 previously prepared supply pods in strategically chosen locations and parachute out of plane yourself. Third stage is the mission itself. There are 12 different types of these missions, and they vary quite considerably from one another. From capturing of the enemy officer, through blowing up of an ammunition depot, to photographing of experimental craft and liberation of POWs. Out of all 3 games in the series, only the first is The Last Ninja, and the others are just Last Ninja 2 and 3. Do they imply that you're not the one but a copycat? Hard to tell, but this first entry is where it all started, and it's an isometric view action-adventure game in which you play as Armakuni, the ninja who must travel to the palace of the evil shogun Kunitoki to assassinate him in revenge for your clan's destruction and to recover sacred scrolls. The game mixes simple environmental puzzling with a rather fun and engaging combat using a variety of ninja-adjacent weapons, like shurikens, nunchakus, katanas, and harsh and unpleasant comments about your mother's age and weight. It's a good game, and only one out of all these weapons is not really present in it in any shape or form. Not gonna tell you which one though. The Great Gianna Sisters is arguably 2 things. The best side-scrolling platformer on C64 and also one of the most important games on the system. It was originally conceptualized as a proof that Super Mario Bros. Could be pulled off on Commodore's machine, and after it released, it was clear that it could. But Big N was always the Big N, and they didn't like the idea of someone having fun on other platforms than their own, and they've quickly shut down the project with series of well-written and scary-worded legal documents. The game was recalled and removed from shop shelves. It however not only survived all that, but also thrived in the piracy scene, quickly becoming one of the most popular games on the system. In fact, I've never met a C64 owner who didn't own a copy, and literally a copy I must add. To summarize it, however, it's a legally distinct, because yeah, I believe the case could be won in a court, clone of Mario, with Mario and Luigi replaced with Gianna and Maria, and most Nintendo characters with other generic bodies. Neither of the sisters grew after eating mushrooms, but other power-ups were available, and the game took place in over- and underworld stages, same as Mario did too. Story-wise, the Great Gianna Sisters is supposedly set within Gianna's dream, and to wake up from it, she must find and collect a mystical giant diamond, as opposed to regular ones, which play the same role as coins did in Mario. Gunship is a flight combat simulation in which you're jumping behind the flying stick of the AH-64A Apache and spread death and destruction over literally dozens of missions across 4 regions of the world: Southeast Asia, Central America, Middle East and Soviet Union. Some would say that Gunship run on C64 was a disappointment as compared to much more powerful 16-bit machines, but if you keep in mind how big and complicated game it is, and how much the devs managed to pull off on the Micro Machine, you just can't be unimpressed by it. Now, did I play it a lot? Nope, I suck at simulations and big time, but I dabbled, and trying and failing was a little fun for a short while too. Summer Games 2 is another of those awesome Epix's multi-event sports compilations and a fantastic time to be had if you have a friend with you, or better yet 7 of them, and a couple of joysticks you're not emotionally attached to, as some of them are naturally bound to not survive all the fun you'll be having. The selection of disciplines is pretty wide and fun, and you'll get to compete in triple jump, rowing, javelin, equestrian, which sounds like a name of a villain in a James Bond movie, high jump, fencing, cycling and kayaking. I never understood the appeal of sports, especially watching sports, but these sports compilations by Epix are so playable, I loved every minute I spent at them. Oh, in multiplayer I naturally meant in multiplayer, as in single, they get old really fast. Boulder Dash is probably the most well-known and popular of all microcomputer 8-bit puzzlers other than Tetris. I believe that we've spoke about its successor already, and the original is virtually the same. So you still have to traverse through mazes collecting crystals, and when you get plenty enough of them, the passage to the next stage opens. The levels are arranged in a way that makes you think how to approach said crystal picking, for the lack of a better word, keeping in mind all the rocks that can crush you, bodies that kill you upon touch, and the situations in which you could soft lock yourself in a spot, unable to progress. Interestingly enough, Boulder Dash was so difficult that it was even eventually ported to the arcades, where it happily ate up thousands upon thousands of coins of gamers hungry for puzzling challenges. Exodus, dirty spawn of villains from the previous Ultima games, Minax and Mundane, is threatening the world of Sosaria. Not yet Britannia, mind you, that change would actually come later in the series. So, you must take party of 4 heroes to defeat Exodus and restore peace. Ultima 3 is the first in the series to introduce party as opposed to singular hero, also separate tactical turn-based combat screens, and offers a whopping 11 classes to choose from fighter through ranger and wizard to alchemist and anything in between. There's no drunk or town idiot though, but you just can't have them all. There are 5 races available however, and these determine limitations on maximum stat growth, so it's best to match them with appropriate class as well. As most RPGs of the time, Exodus is played on top-down screens, with dungeon exploration taking place in first-person 3D view. I've been known to say this quite often when talking about Project Firestart, at least 3-4 times to date on this channel, but I consider it to be the very progenitor of the entire survival horror genre of games. Sure, it's not 3D perhaps, and there are no zombies in it, but boy oh boy, can it be nerve-wracking. You arrive on Prometheus, a research spaceship orbiting around Titan, and discover that the entire crew had been brutally murdered by an unknown being, or beings. Upon further investigation and exploration, it appears that sadly it's not a being, but many of them, which makes your mission of retrieving of all the data from the ship in time before the Earth will send self-destruct signal to it considerably more difficult. Project Firestart is a very cinematic looking game, and to this day I am amazed by its stunning atmosphere and peak presentation. Show me a better golf game on C64 than world-class leaderboard, and I'll show you someone who's mistaken. And it's not gonna be you, cause it's still a mostly free world and you're entitled to your own opinion, even if it's wrong. Still, leaderboard, in this world-class outing no less, was naturally made by Access Software, now a veteran of this niche of a sports subgenre, but back then, a revolutionary software house. Up to 4 people can enjoy this gem of a game at once, or alternating to be precise. It's golf after all, and it's as close to the real thing in its simulation aspects of everything golf related as it was possible to achieve on a lowly C64. And the fact that it was also really fun, like some of these early Marvel movies, made it a fantastic addition to any and all Commodore's gamers libraries. Winter Games is easily the best multi-event sports game on C64. And no wonder, as it has everything to be one. It supports up to 8 players at once, it has beautiful graphics and sounds, and an interesting and fun selection of disciplines. So slalom, ski jumping, biathlon, bobsled, figure skating, speed skating, luge, which sounds like a tropical disease you get from drinking dirty water, but is actually a single-person version of bobsled. And there's also freestyle skiing and free skating to round it all up. The events can be attempted sequentially as a choice of few or one by one. Not many people know that, but the developer of C64 version, So Action Graphics, were the one responsible for the system's nearly as good of a port of Activision's famous Decathlon. Paradroid is a top-down shoot-em-up with puzzle elements. The objective is to clear fleets of enemy robots by destroying them or taking them over via mini-game. There are 24 types of robots and they all have their power levels written on them. The higher it is, the more difficult the robot is to defeat. The minigame that is used to take over the enemies is based on circuit diagrams and logic gates. And while it takes a minute to get into, it is rather satisfying when you get the hang of it. The minigame is played against the robot that you're trying to take over, and the winner is decided by supplying more power to its circuit. The idea here is based on the fact that even if you're quote-unquote attacking from a weaker position, you can still win by using logic gates to increase your power output. When you take over one droid, the one you were controlling before is instantly destroyed. Bruce Lee is an arcade platform adventure game in which you naturally play as the titular martial arts master, who aims to conquer the wizard's hideout to claim the infinite wealth and secret of immortality. What is Wizard doing there, and why Bruce needs the wealth and immortality? Hard to tell, but perhaps he could predict the future. His real life one that is, and just aims to prevent it. Oh crap, I just checked and he actually died in 1973, so my theory is not valid anymore. All of the chambers that you'll go through require you to complete a few simple tasks to open passage further, and are guarded by the ninja and green stocky warrior, Yamo. Since these two constantly respawn, it's best to try to avoid them rather than put them down. Interestingly enough, if you have a friend with you, he or she can grab a second joystick and then control Yamo, which makes the game easier and also much more fun. Pool of Radiance is the first ever computer adaptation of AD&D, and holy crap, was it a fantastic game. I mean, it had everything, from the ruins of old city full of monsters that needed to be driven away, through a huge badass dragon, tons upon tons of gear, amazing tactical turn-based combat, all the spells, skills, races and classes you could hope for in a computerized version of a tabletop adventure, and most of all, it came on more diskettes than any other game on C64 at the time. Oh wait, that last is not a good thing. Anyway, the Pool of Radiance runs in the first-person view for exploration and adventuring, and switches to top-down turn-based strategic view for combat encounters. It's a first game in the now iconic Gold Box series of RPGs by SSI, and as such, it will forever be remembered as one of the most important games ever made, even if disc juggling it made you go through could give you a severe case of carpal tunnel. Legacy of the Ancients is a traditional role-playing, in which after picking up a scroll found next to a dying man, you unintentionally become the next in the line of adventurers attempting to destroy this very scroll. Why? Because it's a so-called wizard's compendium that would make anyone possessing and capable of using it near unstoppable. And since it's such a sought-after object, you can bet your sweet ass that there will be people after it, and by extension of that, after you too. You experience most of Legacy in a top-down tile-based view, with 3D viewpoint used in dungeons. There are no experience points in the game, which is quite unusual for the genre, and you receive level ups after successful completion of various quests. It's worth noting that Legacy has a rather high entry point because of how difficult it initially is, serving demanding encounters and very skimpy drops. But when you finally manage to arm yourself properly, it picks up the pace. Turrican was created by Manfred Trenz alone. And it's a love letter to the platform, squeezing everything that there was out of rapidly by 1990 aging system. It's a Metroidvania type of an action shooter, which should never work on C64. Not only it did, however, but also super smoothly, and even spawned as good as it was a follow-up a year later, and another one even further down the line. Tons upon tons of different weapons, obscene numbers of deadly enemies, and exploration-based gigantic levels made Turrican a classic that was very quickly ported to most other systems on the market. Morgul, an AI governing human-made colony Altera, rebelled and killed most of the colonists. It was ruling the colony alone for years after, until decades later Turrican, a mutant bioengineered warrior, was sent to reclaim the planet. and you play as that exact Ninja Turtle. I mean, warrior. Neuromancer, the game that had no business releasing on C64 and yet, not only did, but was also a rather amazing title. It's a cyberpunk sci-fi adventure loosely based on William Gibson's novel of the same title. Same as in the book, the game is split into two realities, real world and cyberspace, and you'll spend a lot of time in both trying to discover the mysterious disappearances taking place in 2058 in Chiba, Japan. Before you'll be able to access cyberspace, however, you'll need to recover your cyberspace deck that you pawned since you were short of money. Neuromancer is your traditional for the setting, high-tech low-life story, and as such, works wonderfully on Commodore's beast of an 8-bit system. Viewer, however, as some aspects of the story can end your playthrough instantly, so always make sure to think through your decisions and don't rush them. Mule is a mostly turn-based multiplayer business strategy and a lot of fun if you have someone like-minded willing to play it. If not, then, well, it's a game, that's for sure. It is set on a fictional planet Irata, which if you can read backwards actually stands for Atari, and it's a balancing act in which you must evolve your company, all the while taking advantage of a rather robust for an 8-bit system supply and demand-based economics. The goal is naturally to amass the largest amount of wealth, but also to ensure the survival of the colony. Mule is built around 4 resources and real estate, and I gotta say, for such an early game in C64's life, it's a brilliant little title that's as fun today as it was in 1983. Oh, and it would have made a pretty good board game too. I wonder if anyone thought of that yet. Archon: The Light and the Dark is a game that I loved playing basically with anyone as long as they were willing, as it was a fantastic mixture of strategy similar to chess with action-based combat comparable to some of the early shooters. The game pits light and dark, so good and evil warlocks against one another, and each of them has an army of unique creatures. While they differ between the two sides in how they look, move and attack, they are more or less equivalents of one another. The strategic part of the game sees you and your opponent moving your pieces alternating, and when the two contest the same square, the game switches into arcade action-based combat, which is quite fun, and with a bit of practice allows you to sometimes beat stronger pieces with your weaker ones. It's a simple but hella playable concept and one worth revisiting even today. Impossible Mission is an action-adventure platformer, and I will swear till the day I die that Mission Impossible movies were based on it, even if they weren't. So yeah, they most definitely were. You play as a super secret agent or secret super agent, whichever you prefer, who must stop the evil Professor Alvin Atombender from tampering with the national security computers. So you must infiltrate his stronghold, find all the missing pieces of the password leading to his safe room and then capture him, all the while avoiding his deadly robots, and do all of that within the 6-hour timer. Every time you die, the game respawns you in the same room, but subtracts 10 minutes from your remaining time. Interestingly enough, all the rooms, robots and puzzle pieces are placed randomly, meaning that each consecutive playthrough will be a bit different. It's gonna be a bit tough for me to explain it in just a few sentences, and especially that it's easier to do it when following Ultima 4, but that one actually placed higher on our list and henceforth will come later. Ultima 5 is the second game in the second Ultima trilogy. Yeah, I know, there's a lot of them really, and it builds on the changes brought to the series by its predecessor. So it's all about virtues. This time, however, it's not Avatar learning and mastering them, but evil tyrant Lord Blackthorn, who replaced Lord British in mysterious circumstances, enforcing twisted versions of them on the populace. As the game progresses, Avatar will discover who stands behind Lord Blackthorn's corruption and will form a party of warriors of destiny to bring back order to Britannia. Laser Squad is a progenitor of the entire turn-based squad-centric strategy genre. You know, a daddy to titles like Jagged Alliance or UFO Enemy Unknown. It's also one of the first games ever to receive paid DLC with additional missions. It was conceived by the Golub brothers, responsible for the later aforementioned UFO series. The missions that you'll partake in will mainly involve you in a hostage retrieval or rescue and killing of all enemies. Correct use of cover and weaponry along with action points management are a key to success. And going for the slower is faster approach is the king in Laser Squad, as it's better to analyze the situation at hand for a bit longer and pick the best action, rather than choose fast and then suffer the consequences. I think that everyone will agree that The Last Ninja 2 Back with a Vengeance is the best out of the entire trilogy. It offers the most satisfying mixture of story, action-based combat and adventuring, and is just a very playable 8-bit release. After having secured the Koga scrolls in the first game, our titular hero, now possessing all the secrets of his ninja clan, began training New Order of Shadow Warriors. But as he does just that, he is mysteriously transported to the 20th century New York City, where he once again must defeat the modern iteration of the once bested by him evil Shogun Kunitoki and his goons. Same as in the original, the gameplay comprises of mostly clashing with buddies and simple, mainly environmental puzzling. While Elite was not Frontier, it was still a mother effing Elite. So a free-form space trading combat simulation set in space, in which you could lead your best sci-fi space opera-inspired life. And it was a life that you literally had to craft on your own and not by following any pre-programmed paths. So you could be a trader, you could work for the military, bounty hunt space pirates, become a pirate yourself, because why the hell not, and even dabble in asteroid mining. Or you could do all of that and not settle on one thing. The universe was your oyster, and you were there to take the advantage of everything it had to offer. Even if Elite was not as big as Frontier, and truth be told for decades nothing really was, it still offered 8 galaxies that comprised of 256 planets and basically limitless possibilities of making all of those geek sci-fi dreams come true. Defender of the Crown. One of the most famous of Cinemaware's games, and also the best port of the title out of any that they've made. It's a true masterpiece for the 8-bit platform and a title that every C60 owner had, either in a beautiful full-boxed edition with all the bells and whistles, or as a copy of questionable legality. Either way, everyone played it and everyone loved it. Cinemaware was famous for striving to release their games as cinematic experiences. So each of them was built out of many very movie-like feeling scenes, featured different gameplay styles and deep mechanics. And Defender of the Crown was not different. While theoretically you were strategically competing for the control of England in the Middle Ages, in reality you did much more. You stormed castle walls yourself, took part in sword fights, organized and participated in tournaments, and led huge armies. It was a phenomenal release for 1987 and a gem in C64's vast library. Wasteland is easily one of the most important RPGs of the early era of video gaming. Not only it's a fantastic title with interesting lore, excellent story and very solid turn-based combat, but it's also responsible for 2 equally if not more important things, proving that RPGs could move beyond fantasy and sci-fi and settle comfortably in post-apo setting. And it was also a granddaddy of Fallout, my most beloved role-playing series ever. That said, these are not the reasons why it's so high on this list, because it's reached this spot purely based on being a bloody good game. In Wasteland, you're leading a group of so-called desert rangers all around the desolate and destroyed by the post-nuclear war leftovers of continental US, traveling from town to town and unraveling a sinister plot that threatens the survival of what's left of humanity. Wasteland is also one of the first RPGs that allowed character stats to influence the situations and activities outside of combat. So a strong character could move heavy objects, charisma could influence the outcome of conversations, and so on. Bubble Bobble is the best single-screen action platformer for up to 2 players on C64. For me it's always going to be Rodland that takes the cake, but I understand and can agree that objectively speaking, Bubble Bobble may be better and more important release. Also, the music. There are but a few games with this iconic tune, which funny enough you're not going to hear in this video, as every time I leave it in a video on YouTube, I get a copyright claim from some random DJ who remixed it in the past. Anyway, Bubble Bobble is naturally a port from the arcades and tells the tale of Bob and Bob, who embark on an epic 100-level spanning quest of finding and defeating evil Baron von Baba for kidnapping of their girlfriends. So in Bubble Bobble, you play as 2 cute dragons, fighting with balloons with even cuter creatures, by encasing them within said balloons and then popping them. It's a simple but very addictive formula. While Ultima 4 Quest for the Avatar is not the first Ultima game on this list, it's the one that was chosen as the best. It's the first title in the second Ultima trilogy, and one that considerably changed how the games play by evolving them from mainly dungeon-crawling combat-oriented titles into deeper, ethically nuanced story-driven adventure, grander than life. The fact that its map was a whopping 16 times larger than that of Ultima 3, that the dialogue system was heavily expanded, and that the world was considerably more interactive than ever before, made it an ultimate, sorry for the bad pun, titling the evolution of the series. Interestingly enough, Ultima 4's story was not about defeating of huge evil or stopping impending doom of any kind, but of avatars, so the protagonists of the game, self-improvement and learning of the 8 so-called virtues. Oh, actually he's not Avatar yet, until he eventually learns the virtues, so perhaps I've spoken out of order. Sorry. Before I'll say anything else about it, I'm gonna tell you what I just discovered after having played International Karate Plus on and off for literally decades. Well, not literally, I'm not that old, but definitely for many years. So International Karate Plus is actually called Chop and Drop in the US. Now how cool is that? I mean, for those of you who hail from the US of A, it's probably no news, but it blew my mind. I mean, I like our naming here too, but yours is just more fun. Anyway, however you wanna call it, it's a versus fighting game in which up to 2 players can compete in 1v1v1 karate competition. And yes, you heard that right, there's 3 of these ones in it. So there are always 3 fighters on the screen and only up to 2 can be human controlled. As you can imagine, it can cause a lot of chaos, but it's also so much fun. The game was known for being super smooth and beautifully animated too, and it's easily the best title in the genre on C64. Turrican 2 The Final Fight is arguably the best out of all 3 Turrican games and also the best Metroidvania that's not Metroid on any 8-bit system, if that even makes sense. Turrican is fast and so action-packed that if you ever take your finger off that fire button, chances are you'll die in seconds. While Turrican 2 arrived on the Amiga first, Manfred Trenz, the creator of this gem of playability, cited that the C64 version was the original design and just took longer to complete. And honestly, I'm not surprised, as the game of this scope and quality was a rarity on a small system. Turrican 2 is set in the year 3025 and puts you in the very lonely shoes of Brent Maguire, a single survivor of an alien cybernetic being known as the Machine on the United Planets ship Avalon 1. And being alone and pissed off is the worst place mentally that you'd want someone to be in, as they're capable of anything. And Bran, well, let me tell you, he was really pissed off. And even more lonely. Sid Meier's Pirates is the game of all games. It's one of the most important titles ever made and one that's so big that having it on Commodore's little beast seemed all but possible. And yet, not only it arrived on the machine in full 8-bit glory, but was also a fantastic and featureful release. It's a single-player open-world swashbuckling themed adventure in which you can live out your deepest dreams of being the scourge of the sea. You can hunt ships, plunder them, attack cities and forts and be the fiercest of sea warriors that there've ever been. Or, and that's also a viable option, you can hunt pirates, work for one of the 4 powers competing for the Caribbean, trade, get married, seek buried treasures and that's just the beginning of the best adventure of your life that you can experience in Sid Meier's Pirates. And especially that it was an inspiration for dozens if not hundreds of games that came after. It's also my personal pick for the best game on C64. Maniac Mansion was the first ever point-and-click adventure game. Yup, it spawned the famous Scam engine, and by extension of that the entire genre in its modern iteration, and it raised the quality of storytelling to new heights. It even pioneered in-engine cutscenes, which basically no other adventure games did at the time in any capacity. In fact, most didn't do it for years after. Upon Maniac Mansion's release, famous writer Orson Scott Card praised it for being a milestone in video games becoming a valid storytelling art. And that should tell you something about it and also explain its position on this list of 250 best C64 games. Mad scientist Dr. Fred Edison has kidnapped Sandy, and he keeps her in his creepy and full of mysteries mansion. This naturally pisses Dave off beyond belief, as Sandy is his best gal. Sweet Jesus, I'm talking like I'm 95-year-old. Anyway, Dave is angry as he had plans for the both of them for that particular night. Nothing nasty though, just a movie, pizza and maybe some light smooching, with an occasional attempt at the second base. So he asks his friends for help, and together, with the 2 of them, they sneak into the mansion. Well, personally, I wouldn't place Zack McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders in the first spot, because in my head it's permanently reserved for Sid Meier's Pirates that we spoke about literally a minute or 2 ago. It would definitely be in the top 10. Zack is the second of LucasArts' Scam-based point-and-click adventure games, and it's a fantastic addition to their library of releases. It's a sci-fi themed, fun and so out there title, you will be having the best time playing it from start to finish. And C64's port is as good as any other, giving the game due justice. Zack accidentally discovers that the aliens are turning the population dumber and dumber by using public telephone system. So he decides that no one's going to be messing with humanity and that the culprits need to be stopped. Alone, however, he hardly has a chance, so he enlists help of anthropologist Annie and her two friends Melissa and Leslie. And together they will save the Earth. Will you though? Will you hit like to save the planet? Don't let it go to waste and click it fast, please. And we've done it. We've conquered the beast that the 250 plus best C64 games was and emerged victorious. Did you find any of the games particularly interesting or worth trying out? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this trip down the Commodore lane with me, hit those like, sub and bell icons to always get notifications when I release something new. Take care of yourself and I'll talk to you soon.